Welcome to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Chapter 101 Lost Elf. 1/7. P.S. Someone said in the comments that the ancient Tongxi Empire equals the Holy Roman Empire. In fact, I didn't think about it that much when I wrote it, but since you said it, the author has to say, Jingluo shed tears. Sister, didn't you say that you and Yuan are already developing? Why? Angelina followed behind Angelina. He was still chattering about which pot he was not opening and which pot he was lifting. Angelina walked in front, walking faster and faster. Her face became more and more red, and finally, like a pot of boiling water, she shouted furiously, Angazel, shut up. Turning around, he kicked Angelzel's knee violently. Ah! Angelzel cried out in pain, and immediately jumped on the spot with one leg covering his knees. Is it really an elf prince? However you look at it, it looks like a joke. I don't know, stop talking, the second lieutenant is here. The two soldiers on guard were whispering, and when Angelina looked over with a gloomy face, the two of them stood at attention abruptly and shut their mouths. I'm ashamed, hurry up and leave. Angelina pulled Angelina out of the detention center, followed by more than 20 elves in despair. To tell the truth, the way to enter Los's territory is not the same as they imagined. Not to mention that someone welcomed them all the way, no matter what, someone had to welcome them into the city. In reality, they were escorted by 393 in military vehicles all the way, and they couldn't even see any scenery on the road. Because of this, Angelzel and a group of elves opened their eyes wide in surprise when they were in Tino City. At this moment, the city of Tino is half modern and half ancient. However, most of the modern buildings are under construction. Because of the construction of the port, the work is suspended. But that alone is shocking enough. Nearly half of the street, there are almost 100 buildings with shelves outside, and the buildings under construction stand there, giving people a brand new feeling. There are people coming and going on the street, and most of them are in good spirits. Occasionally, a car passed by on the street, causing the elves to look sideways. Vendors pushed his cart along the street selling all kinds of snacks and food. Most of them are all kinds of snacks from the previous Earth that Yuan let people promote. The elves in this era have naturally never seen it. Many people on the street looked curiously at the elves passing by. Tino City has never lacked outsiders, but such a group of elves is still very rare. Brother Elf, do you want to try our special honey-braised pork? A peddler pushed a trolley to the side of Angelzel and sold it to him. Meat. Then Angelzel waved his hand and refused. I'm sorry, as an elf, most of me are vegetarian. He said so in his mouth, but in fact he was slightly disdainful in his heart. He also ate food made by humans, and he ate a lot when passing through the Gutongxi Empire, but most of them were unpalatable. So when he saw a peddler coming to sell something to him, he refused with the arrogance unique to elves. As a high elf, it is natural to disdain to eat human food. But before he finished speaking, the companion next to him smiled slyly, and as a prank, he directly inserted a piece of meat with a toothpick and stuffed it into Angelzel's mouth. Although Angelzel is an elf prince, he gets along very well with his subordinates. They are more like friends to each other, and they often make jokes and pranks. What are you doing? Angelzel was startled, just about to spit out the stewed meat in his mouth. Human beings do not want to eat food that is difficult to eat. But at this moment, he frowned and started chewing. This meat. I've never eaten it before. It's delicious. Angelzel only felt a salty sweetness, but this sweetness was just right, a very unique texture and taste hit his taste buds. This unprecedented feeling directly paralyzed his mind, the whole person was immersed in this unique fragrance. One more piece and another piece. He hesitated to yell. No. The elf next to him was dumbfounded. He just played a prank, thinking that Angelzel would spit it out soon, but unexpectedly, he seemed to be addicted. Try it too. It's delicious. He took a fork in his hand, and forked a piece of shiny braised pork. No more. The elf looked at the piece of greasy stewed meat, shook his head and hands quickly, with a face of rejection. Take a bite, bro. Angelzel, like Wang Jingzi's upper body, sent the stewed meat in his hand to the elf's mouth. Want a sip? The elf hesitated, he opened his mouth, and swallowed the stewed meat. As soon as the stewed meat entered his mouth, his eyes widened immediately. Oh, this meat. It feels like I've never eaten it before. Looking at Angelzel in astonishment, he nodded sharply while chewing. Angelzel had a smile on his face, and the two elves looked at each other and laughed. One more bite and one more bite. Under the smiling face of the peddler, the honey sauce marinated meat in this cart was actually wrapped round by these two elves. The world is delicious. I should have come to the kingdom of Law sooner. After a while, the two full-fledged elves clutched their stomachs, regretting why they only came to the kingdom of Ross now. Compared with such delicacies, the food they ate in their lives could be thrown into the stinky ditch. Angelzel picked his teeth with a toothpick in a very disfigured manner, and turned to call other companions, but this time, he was dumbfounded. Where are people? The two elves froze in place, only to see that the team that was behind them just now had disappeared. There were people coming and going behind them, and Angelina had disappeared with the other elves, leaving the two of them alone in the crowd. The two elves wandered the streets for a long time, and the unique street structure of the human city made them more and more confused. In the end, the two of them unanimously determined that they were lost. God. They have never lost their way in the Golden City where nearly 1 million elves live, but now they can get lost in such a human city. It's a joke to say it. Radio. The kingdom's latest product, radio. Do you want to be able to hear theater concerts at home? Do you want to be able to hear theater funny jokes at home? Then hurry up and buy the latest product, radio. 32. Brand new products, radios, only 5 gold coins each. New fancy clothes, new store opening bonus, 50% off the whole shop. Roast duck, delicious roast duck. There were loudspeakers shouting in front of many shops on the commercial street, while Angelzel and an elf walked down the street in a daze. They got lost. No matter how colorful the world is, at this moment in their gloomy world, it's all gray. Wow, it looks so interesting over there, let's go and have a look. Angelzel was melancholy for a long time like a handsome melancholy prince, but the next moment he was instantly attracted by the bustling human street, and pulled the elf next to him and ran towards the commercial street. The two of them successfully got lost in this colorful world. Chapter 102 Hanging Dragon Head. 2/7. P.S. Chapter 2. There are 4 more. Is this the kingdom of Ross? We've arrived. Outside the city of Tino, a group of people came here. All the envoys will first rest in Tino City, and then go to Lost City. All of them were wearing exquisite and lightweight armor with magic runes tattooed on them, and their faces were full of arrogance. The armor on them is not only light, but also strong in defense, and even has a certain degree of magic shield, which is enough to easily resist arrows and certain magic attacks. A great knight held his head high, his face full of arrogance, his eyes swept the pedestrians passing by outside the city gate, and at the same time he looked at the 10-meter-high city wall of Tino City, with full disdain and contempt in his eyes. Such a low city wall, as expected, only lowly mortals can build it, and he might be able to turn it over with one hand. With arrogance and contempt for ordinary people, he selectively ignored the machine guns and anti-aircraft machine guns placed on the top of the city. You must know that in the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, the walls of any city are more than 20 meters high in order to prevent knights and knights from jumping over the walls with their bare hands. The ancient Tongxi Alliance Empire is close to the Central Territory, and the magicians of the Central Domain Magic Empire look at other realms with the eyes of mortals, and the core members of the ancient Tongxi Alliance Empire are close to the Central Territory, so they also think that I am as noble as the magicians of the Magic Empire. So they also look down on other human countries, even including some marginal small countries in their own alliance. But as everyone knows, the magicians in the Central Domain will not look at them at all. I really don't know why the Duke would give a gift to such a small mortal country that can't wait to become emperor just after reaching the qualification to become emperor. Tisk, there isn't even a single magician, and the magic element is incredibly barren. I feel like I'm going to throw up when I'm mixed with this group of mortals. A magician covered his nose with a handkerchief, speaking in a style. I really don't understand the Duke. If you want to send troops to fight, you can send troops directly. I even think that only one country's troops are enough. Look at these soldiers, they don't have complete armor, only a pair of breastplates, and their bodies are pitifully weak. I really don't know what they used to defeat the Orc Empire. The orcs are also a group of lowly things, can they be compared with us? This line of gift-giving teams sent by the Duke of Golden Lion stood at the gate of the city, talking to themselves, thinking that they were very arrogant and picky in every possible way. Look, orc. A knight raised his head slightly, and said to his companions. They just saw a team of 100 Earth orcs approaching. Finally reached. His Majesty is finally proclaiming himself Emperor. As His Majesty's loyal servants, we must do our duty with all our heart. Maybe His Majesty will use us in the ceremony and ask us to be a special guard. Vom wiped the sweat from his forehead. He called the taxi orc team to be the first among the 7 kingdoms of orcs to arrive at Tino City. Clear. All the Earth orc heavy infantry roared. They wore the most exquisite and beautiful armor of the Orc Empire, just to hope that they could show their faces in front of Yuan. Look, soldiers of the Empire. Have you seen the weapons on their bodies? It's the kind of powerful weapon that led us into Halma, into the palace, and liberated us Earth orcs. An Earth orc heavy infantryman spoke proudly to a companion next to him. And during the battle, I took an arrow for an Imperial soldier, and I saw that there is still a bandage under this shoulder. He said very proudly, he was very proud of saving a Ross soldier. The Earth orcs have always been a race that repays their kindness, and their king swore an oath of blood to Yuan, and Yuan led his troops to liberate them from the Orc Empire, and they naturally acquiesced. My own family are all loyal servants of Yuan. Moreover, their land orc kingdom has always had Ross merchants coming, and they are spreading the goodness of the Ross kingdom to them everywhere. Naturally, they also had infinite yearning for the kingdom of Ross in their hearts. Although Yuan has not officially proclaimed the emperor yet, the name they call the kingdom of Ross has become the empire. Moreover, Yuan believed that as long as he was loyal to his duty, Yuan would allow them to join the empire completely one day. The Earth orcs yearn for civilization at all times, and after staying with the barbaric beasts for a long time, they yearn for civilization even more. 0. With technology, the more powerful Ross Empire is a symbol of civilization in their hearts. HMPH, disgusting and lowly orcs, people from the kingdom of Ross are actually mixing with them, tisk. Why? A knight in the Golden Lion Duke's team watched coldly and spit on the ground. Okay, I'm ready to enter the city. After all, the Lord Duke is a person who values the kingdom of Ross very much. If you lose face, it will not only be your own face, but also the face of the Lord Duke. The team leader said coldly. Get ready to go to town. A group of people started to pass through the outer city gate, and when they entered the outer city and saw the second city wall, they all trembled and their eyes widened. Dragon head. They looked in shock at the huge dragon head that had been specially processed and turned into a specimen hanging above the gate of the second city wall. The head of the giant dragon with its eyes closed tightly hangs lifelike on the city wall, shocking everyone, as if they can still feel the aftermath of the dragon when it was alive. Since the last time they brought down a giant dragon, the people of Tino City have been very proud. They cut off the dragon's head and made a specimen, which was hung on the second city wall. Anyone who despises Tino City will be shocked enough after passing through the first city gate. Bastards. These hateful mortals. How dare you do that? There are a few dragon knights in this line of team. They didn't ride the dragon, but as beings connected with the mount, they seemed to feel the wailing and pain of the giant dragon before it died. Immediately, they all flew into a rage and roared. Look, the logo on the dragon's head, that's the dragon of the missing knight of Aren. A sharp-eyed knight shouted. It's Aren's dragon. The missing Aren was killed in Tino City. How dare they lowly mortals? All the night magicians roared angrily. Ha 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 ha. A dragon. The soldiers of the empire are so brave. Suddenly a loud laugh came, causing all the knights to turn a blind eye. Chapter 103 The Incompetent and Furious Knight. 3/7. P.S. The third update today, and the fourth update. Wom looked at the head of the giant dragon hanging on the city wall, and he burst out laughing. The adults of the empire are so brave, they can actually take down such a giant dragon. Yes, if I can kill a dragon in my lifetime, that would be great. As long as you follow the empire, we will too. The Earth orc soldiers who entered the first city gate exclaimed and talked to each other, but this aroused the glaring of the knights. You bloody orcs, shut up. A dragon knight couldn't take it anymore, he roared. When is it your turn to speak here? Vom sneered, and all the orc heavy infantry looked at the angry knights with sneers. This is the city of the Lost Empire, what are you guys? August 20th, are you angry when you see the dragon that was shot down by the adults of the Empire? Ha ha ha, Knights of the Gutongxi Alliance. A group of Earth Orc heavy infantry began to mock the knights under the Duke of Golden Lion. My god. There is a dragon's head hanging on this. At this time, there was another scream, and the knights glared, only to see that two teams had just entered the city gate. Looking at the flags they hung, they were the teams of two kings. They are two small countries on the edge of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, next to the Ross Empire. Like the previous kingdom of Ross, they are also mortal countries without magicians. Although they belong to the ancient Tongxi Alliance Empire, they are not taken seriously at all. This time they came to participate in Ji Yuan's enthronement ceremony and also saw the hope of the rise of mortals in Ji Yuan. To be honest, they came here this time to please the rising Ross Empire, and by the way, to see if the Ross Empire has a future. If the future of the Ross Empire is promising, maybe they will jump ship from the Gutongxi Alliance to the Ross Empire. Anyway, they are not valued by the Gutongxi Alliance Empire itself. Becoming a younger brother to anyone is alright, so it's better to see if this new boss can bring them any benefits. My god, it just blows my mind. The Ross Empire is really powerful, it is able to defeat such a giant dragon. The kings of the two teams supported the crowns on their heads and exclaimed. The leaders of the two teams are the kings of their respective countries. They are all wearing fur coats from the kingdom of Ross, wearing their own court clothes inside, and wearing long leather boots on their feet. They also wore crowns representing their noble identities on their heads. The combination of modern and ancient clothes seemed a little nondescript. In their country, most of the civilian nobles have already started to use products from the Ross Empire. As kings, they naturally want to be at the forefront of the trend. Moreover, their attire is considered very luxurious in their respective countries, fur coats and long leather boots. Ordinary nobles can't afford to wear them, and they are also very proud of their attire. Thinking, even in the Ross Empire, what they wear should be in line with the status of a nobleman. As a result, when they arrived in Tino City, they realized that the fur coats and leather boots on them were only slightly better than those worn by ordinary civilians. While this made them feel ashamed, they felt even more in their hearts that the Ross Empire was so powerful that even commoners were not inferior to the two kings in their clothes. And after seeing the head of the giant dragon hanging on the city wall, they became more certain that they were going to take refuge in the Ross Empire. **Hole, Wallace IV. Gunther 3, get the dragon head off. After seeing the two kings, the Great Knight, the leader of the Golden Lion Duke's team, snorted coldly and ordered to the two kings. After Wallace IV and Gunther 3 saw the big Golden Lion banner of the team, both of their faces turned green. They really did not expect that they could meet the members of the Golden Lion Duke's team here. And it seems that the people sent by the Duke of Golden Lion are very dissatisfied with the dragon head hanging on the city wall. Although Wallace IV and Guns 3 were very dissatisfied, they were very afraid of the Duke of Golden Lion. Guns 3 hesitated to move. At this time, Wallace IV suddenly grabbed Guns 3 and said, "You are stupid, this is the Ross Empire. We are here as envoys. After we show our allegiance to Emperor Ross, you can ask people from the Ross Empire to back you up. What are you afraid of him doing?" Guns 3 suddenly came back to his senses. Yes, this is the Ross Empire. Not his country. If someone from the Duke of Golden Lion came to Gunther, he would naturally be respectful, but this is not the kingdom of Gunther, this is the Empire of Loss. And there are so many people here, if my two kings just obey other people's orders, it would be a shame. I heard that His Majesty the Emperor of the Ross Empire is very displeased with the Duke of the Golden Lion. Did they dare to make mistakes in the cities of the Ross Empire? As soon as he thought that there would be people from the Ross Empire behind him to support him, Guns 3 stopped moving, as if he hadn't heard the words of the Great Knight. The Great Knight really didn't expect that the two kings didn't seem to hear him when he said a word, and they ignored him. Suddenly, the anger in his heart made him turn red. Come on, the people of the Golden Lion Duke, I think you should go back obediently. This is the Ross Empire, it's not your turn to make trouble here as a slave. Wam was talking slowly beside him. This respected orc, do you know who you are? Wallace IV bowed to Vom and asked. I am the patriarch of the Earth Orc clan, a loyal servant of His Majesty the Emperor of the Ross Empire, and the King of the Kingdom of Wakan, Vom. Vom said proudly to Wallace IV. The country established by the Earth Orcs is called the Kingdom of Wakan, and Vom is the first king. It turns out that the Ross Empire split the Orc Empire is true. Wallace IV and Guns 3 were shocked in their hearts, but they didn't show it on the surface. It turned out to be the king of the Kingdom of Wakan. I'm sorry, can I enter the city with the team of the two of you? 1.1. I admire the Emperor very much, please also. Wallace IV, Gunther 3, and Wom chatted and led the team into the city, as if the team led by the Great Knight did not exist. Bastards. A bunch of low bloody bastards. The Great Knight gritted his teeth and stared, furious, but here in Tino City, he really couldn't do anything about it. The Ross soldiers standing guard just looked at him coldly. Although I don't know what method the Ross soldiers used to take down the dragon, but since they can take down the dragon, they must be able to kill the Big Knight, so the Big Knight really dare not vent their anger on the people of the Ross Empire. I'm so angry, but he really can't do anything about him. Just wait, when the Lord Duke attacks, he will kill both of you. The Big Knight stared, bloodshot eyes, thinking angrily in his heart. Chapter 104 The Gutongxi Empire will collapse. 4/7. P.S. The fourth update, there are 3 more. The teams of Wallo's Kingdom, Gunther Kingdom, Wakan Kingdom, and 6 other Orc kingdoms rested in Tino City. During this period, Wallace IV, Guns 3, Vom and others constantly marveled at the changes in Tino City. In the past, Wallace IV and Guns 3 came to Tino City when the Nord Kingdom was still there, but Tino City at that time was far worse than the expanded Tino City of the Kingdom of Ross. How powerful and rich a country is can be seen from the living conditions and spiritual outlook of the people at the bottom. The pedestrians passing by on the street are basically red-faced, their clothes are clean and tidy, and they look full of energy. If you place it in a small country at random, this is impossible. It can be seen from the living standards and spiritual outlook of the people at the bottom. Moreover, after tasting the street food in Tino City, Wallace IV and Gunther 3 almost didn't swallow their tongues. The 2 kings brought their guards, and they ate in the street in a very unimpressive manner. At the end of the meal, the 2 burst into tears. Compared with the food in Tino City, as kings, what did they eat in the country? It was shit. Spirits. The 2 kings were dangling on the street, and they saw 2 elves 09 dangling indiscriminately on the street. Your Highness, when are we going to find it? We haven't found Her Royal Highness yet. We are really lost. Since the 2 elves lost their way, they walked around for a long time in disbelief, but in the end, they still couldn't find where Angelina was. Look, Your Highness, the 2 teams in front should be the team of messengers, we just follow them. Then we can go to Los Angeles. The elf put down the barbecue skewer in his hand, and hurriedly said to Angel Zell. Yes. Angel Zell's eyes lit up. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. When the 2 kings saw the 2 elves approaching, they coughed dryly, and then hid the barbecue skewers in their hands behind them, trying to put on a majestic look. After all, they were both kings, and could not lose their dignity before the elves. But unfortunately, the oil stains on the corners of their mouths and beards exposed them. Ahem, this is His Royal Highness the Elf Prince of Jinjing City. The elf stood in front of the 2 kings with his hands behind his back, and introduced it proudly. He didn't want to stand with his hands behind his back, and the barbecue skewers were hiding behind him. It seems that they also don't want these 2 to make the scene where the elves are disfigured. It turned out to be His Royal Highness, it's a pleasure to meet you. The 2 kings also stood with their hands behind their backs, both smiling. Angel Zell stood with his hands behind his back, and the barbecue skewers were hiding behind him. He lowered his head and licked the corners of his mouth to wipe off the grease, then raised his head and asked, "Are you a team of envoys from other countries?" Then, the 2 elves stood with their hands behind their backs, standing there in a very dignified manner, and began to talk aristocratically. If you ignore the big skewers hidden behind them. After the 2 kings knew that Angelzel in front of them was not only the elf prince, but also His Majesty Emperor Gu Yuan of the Lost Empire, and his brother-in-law, the 2 of them were astonished. A burst of flattery and kind words. Then Zell and the elf joined the team of the two very successfully. It seems that the name of brother-in-law still works. Poor Angelzel, he has forgotten what happened to him when he said that his brother-in-law is Gu Yuan. Before entering the city of Tino, they were escorted by soldiers in military vehicles. At this moment, Ross City has gathered more than 100,000 Ross troops. In the past few days, they have also been practicing formation and walking on the wide avenue in the center of the city. Fortunately, they practiced every day before walking in the queue, and after a few days of high-intensity training, they were almost ready. In the end, although the guards of honor in Gu Yuan's previous life were not as neat as replicas, they were already able to surpass the army of this era by a large margin. Tanks, anti-aircraft machine guns on trucks, artillery on trucks, soldiers on trucks. Driving in front of the Empire State Building in the center of the city, Gu Yuan nodded repeatedly. The Empire State Building is 100 meters high, and its length and width are not inferior to its height. It is already considered a very magnificent building in this era. The top of the building is covered with glass, and the 4 characters, Empire State Building, on the top are extraordinary. It looks like the Pentagon. 3 days later, all the teams arrived in Rose City, preparing to attend Gu Yuan's enthronement ceremony. They were uniformly arranged by Gu Yuan. However, Gu Yuan was still taken aback when he saw the Duke of Golden Lion's signature on the invitation card. Because he really didn't expect the Duke of Golden Lion to send him a gift. With a sneer, he threw the greeting card aside and Gu Yuan lay down on the chair. Duke of the Golden Lion, this is a weasel giving a New Year greeting to a chicken. Next to the greeting card of the Duke of the Golden Lion, there is an intelligence document that the Duke of the Golden Lion has accelerated the deployment of troops. This Duke of Golden Lion, does he really think I'm a fool? The corner of Gu Yuan's lips curled up. Didn't you send someone here? Well, let your people see the strength of my empire, so that you can weigh whether you want to mess with me. Your Majesty, here are 2 copies of the backs of the human kingdom. They are the Kingdom of Wallace and the Kingdom of Gunther. They hope to break away from the Gutongxi Alliance Empire and join the Empire. They will pay regular tribute to the Empire every year, pay taxes. Quote. Holding the other 2 greeting cards in his hand, Stevens said to Gu Yuan. Both Wallace IV and Guns 3 have prepared 2 greeting cards. One is a normal gift post for all of you to see, and the other is a secret invitation for them to join the Ross Empire. Okay, don't they want to break away from the Gutongxi Empire? I accept it. Let the word out and tell all human countries, all countries that want to break away from the Gutongxi Alliance. I fully support them to stand on their own feet. Gu Yuan said, but suddenly said, no, I will say this sentence at the enthronement ceremony. I, the Ross Empire, will release this sentence in front of everyone. All human countries that want to be independent and break away from the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, my Lost Empire will spare no effort to support. Your Majesty, after all, the Gutongxi Alliance Empire has a population of hundreds of millions. There are so many countries, and our total population is only 10 million. Stevens was shocked. Didn't the Duke of Golden Lion have one thing in the open and one in the dark? Then we will directly state our thoughts. Although the Gutongxi Alliance Empire and the Alliance have a combined population of hundreds of millions, they are more than 100 countries. Added together, they are not of one mind at all, because they are afraid of the Gutongxi Empire itself. They dare not have this idea. But now that our Ross Empire has risen, 2 countries that can't resist immediately want to join us. Why do we refuse? I know, my words have just been released, and not many countries will respond, but once we defeat the Duke of the Golden Lion. Gu Yuan sneered, pressed both hands on the table, and said, then the mountain of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire will collapse. When the time comes to annex all the territories of the Gutongxi Alliance, it will be just around the corner. Chapter 105 Angelina succeeded. 5/7. P.S. Chapter 5. There are 2 more updates today. Your Majesty, the people of the Church have been blocked by us outside our country, and this external influence. Stevens asked again. Don't worry, as long as the Ross Empire exists, people from the Church will not be allowed to enter the Ross Empire to preach. Also, if you occupy new land in the future, you don't need to ask me, just expel the church members directly. Those missionaries don't have to do anything, and they still enjoy the God's faith tax collected from the bottom-level believers. How can there be such a good thing? Yuan sneered. There is no need to do anything, and there will be a large amount of godly faith tax collected every year. He also wants such a good thing, but it is a pity. The empire he worked so hard to build, why should the people of his empire pay taxes to those illusory gods? Secretary Angelina, are you going to see your majesty? Lena was walking in the corridor in the middle of the building and ran into Angelina head-on. Well, I'm going to talk to His Majesty about my younger brother, and I beg His Majesty to forgive him. Angelina nodded, and the golden twin ponytails on the back of her head trembled. At this moment, Angelina narrowed her golden eyes, and saw a red mark on Lena's fair neck. This is? Angelina asked suspiciously. Ah, this. Lena covered her neck with her small hands, her face flushed suddenly. Your Majesty. Angelina only felt her heart tremble and asked. Oh, Secretary Angelina, stop asking. Lena blushed and ran away. Looking at Lena's fleeing back, Angelina seemed a little lost. Lena, she, has a relationship with His Majesty. At the same time, there seemed to be a voice in my heart asking myself, Angelina, how long are you going to wait? Now that the maids around His Majesty have already succeeded, how long are you going to wait? Quickly express your feelings to His Majesty. But, Angelina hesitated again. Your Majesty is the king, the emperor, and it is normal for an emperor to have several women. After His Majesty truly becomes the emperor, there will be a lot of other women who want to fall into His Majesty's arms. Who would not want to be a queen in a powerful empire? Are you willing to just watch by His Majesty's side for the rest of your life, just because you are cowardly but dare not express the feelings hidden in your heart? Can you keep watching other women fall into His Majesty's arms? Are you willing to watch like this for the rest of your life? Are you willing to be just a secretary? No, I don't want to. Angelina suddenly opened her eyes wide, and there was some moisture in her pair of golden eyes. She doesn't want to watch by Yuan's side all her life. Suddenly, I really thought about what it would be like to try to be hugged by Yuan. Yuan. Angelina yelled in her heart. Her slender legs moved, and she ran towards Yuan's study. Secretary Angelina, what's wrong? Stevens, who had just come out of Yuan's study, looked in amazement at Angelina, who hurried past him. In the study, Yuan was signing some documents when suddenly the door opened with a bang. Yuan looked at Angelina standing at the door in amazement, panting continuously. What's wrong? Yuan asked with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Seeing Yuan smile, Angelina stood at the door, her petite body trembling slightly, and her face was full of blush. She walked into the door, slammed the door shut, and leaned against the door, blushing abnormally, panting continuously. Angelina, what's wrong with you? Ill. Yuan stood up and walked towards Angelina. The next thing happened that Yuan didn't expect. Angelina suddenly rushed towards Yuan, and the whole person crashed into Yuan's arms. The body was trembling in Yuan's arms, and Angelina's golden eyes were filled with tears. What's wrong with you? Yuan said anxiously, could it be that he is really sick? I like you. Angelina closed her eyes and let out a loud cry. Yuan was stunned. Angelina suddenly mustered up her courage, closed her eyes, stood on tiptoe, raised her head and kissed Yuan. Feeling the soft touch of his lips, Yuan suddenly widened his eyes. What's going on? Why do all the girls seem impatient? When the two came into contact, a pink magic circle flickered behind Angelina, and disappeared quietly the next second. In the central region, the Central Magic Empire, a figure in a purple robe flying in the sky suddenly stopped in the air. She looked in the direction of the Ross Empire, and a chuckle came from under the golden patterned faceless mask. The voice was extremely charming and alluring. Look, come, then, Shaoni, son, is successful, gong. The sentences are very strange, as if they deliberately did not speak well. Angelina's golden eyes widened in Yuan's arms. Tears flickered in the corners of his eyes, and a small heart in his chest was beating rapidly. She just did what? At this moment, Angelina's face was as hot as a boiling kettle, and she was dizzy, as if steam was coming out. Angelina. Yuan came back to his senses, looked at Angelina's blushing face seriously, and asked, "Are you serious?" Angelina lowered her head and hummed softly. "Then, get ready." Yuan turned around and threw Angelina onto the big sofa in the study, causing Angelina to let out a scream. "What?" Angelina lay on the sofa with her golden eyes open. "Get ready to be queen," Yuan said softly. There was a beautiful smile, Li Dehao, on the corner of Angelina's mouth, but big tears fell from her eyes. "What's wrong? Not happy?" Yuan was shocked when he saw Angelina was in tears. Angelina lowered her head and rubbed her eyes with her small hands, then looked up again, with a very happy smile on her delicate face. Angelina is just so happy. Angelina just thinks, so happy, if life ends at this moment, Angelina also feels it is worth it. "What silly things are you talking about? There will still be a long way to go. When I conquer the entire continent in the future, then you will be the queen of the entire continent." Angelina closed her eyes, enjoying Yuan's embrace. So warm, so happy. P.S. Angelina finally succeeded. Obviously she came very early, but it seems that Lena, Carlo Lin, Tian Luan, and then Angelina hit a home run with Yuan. Chapter 106 Enthronement Ceremony. 6/7. P.S. The 6th update, and one more update. The Sound of Extravagance, A Night of Spring Night. Angelina finally got it right. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the day when Yuan proclaimed himself emperor and held the enthronement ceremony. Not only the Duke of the Golden Lion, but also the Kingdom of Wallace, the Kingdom of Gunther, the 7 kingdoms of the Beastmen, and more than a dozen surrounding human countries also sent envoys or the king himself to participate in the Tongyuan competition during this period. Enthronement Ceremony. Long live your majesty. Long live His Majesty the Emperor. In front of the Empire State Building, there are countless people of the Empire on both sides of the road shouting "Long live." They look excited, their hearts are fanatical and proud. Their great and respected His Majesty the King is about to become His Majesty the Emperor. On both sides of the road, every 10 meters there is a Ross soldier standing upright. They are still dressed in that outfit, the butt of the 98K gun stands on the ground, next to their legs. The black Red Dragon's front breastplate, black military uniform, M35 helmet, and a seemingly cold and ruthless iron face. Look, these are the people of the Ross Empire. With people who are so loyal to the country, why should the Ross Empire not be strong? Wallace IV sat on the viewing platform, and he looked at the people on both sides of the street who were constantly shouting, "Long live." If the people of his country can do this spontaneously, then he will die without regret. A group of unscrupulous people, like that ancient Genichi, are ignorant mortals. The great knight was sitting on the viewing platform, and the anger in his heart had become more and more intense these days. More, because of jealousy. The longer he stayed in the Ross Empire, the more he could discover the prosperity of the Ross Empire and the strength of the Ross Empire. At the same time, he can also feel that there is indeed a gap between the Ross Empire and the Gutongxi Empire. It is the Loth Empire above the ancient Tong's Empire. The longer he stayed in the Ross Empire, the more things he hadn't seen appeared, and the more he understood in his heart. The Loth Empire is really, stronger than the Gutongxi Alliance Empire. Although he knew this in his heart, it was impossible for him to admit that he looked down upon it in his heart and felt that the lowly mortal country had completely surpassed the Gutongxi Empire. The longer he stayed, the more he was jealous of the Ross Empire, Yuan, and the prosperity and power of such a mortal empire. And the source of all this is actually because of his inferiority complex hidden deep in his heart under his haughty appearance. And those people under him sat on the viewing platform, listening to the cheers and excited shouts that were almost loud. They also had different expressions. Salute. Loud shouting sounded at this time. The 9-gun salutes in front of the Empire State Building fired violently. Bang 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 bang. The moment the cannon rang, a man dressed as a general among the orc messengers suddenly knelt down on the ground, covered his ears with his hands, trembling uncontrollably, and murmured incessantly, Don't explode. Me. I am already your vassal. Spare me. Everyone was astonished and looked at the past strangely. The former second prince of the Beastman Empire and the current king of the Beastman Liu Kingdom pulled him up with a gloomy face, and then his two mouths twitched. Turn the beast orc generals draw twice in situ. Damn B**********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************What you are facing is not the artillery fire of the Ross Empire. He growled under his breath. No, not on the battlefield. The beast orc was shocked and came back to his senses. He had participated in the war where the Orc Empire Emperor Londanger attacked Ross's army. Later, they were defeated. He was also frightened by the artillery fire. He was also one of the few people who was not captured and fled back to Halma of Remnants. Poor him, now he will be terrified just by hearing loud noises. The salute continued to roar. And every time the salute was fired, the general's body would tremble subconsciously. No way, he was too impressed by the power of the artillery on the battlefield. Every time there was a sound, there would be explosions around him, and then the companions who were talking and laughing around him were instantly blown away, and when they fell, they were covered in blood. Rain and stumps with broken arms. Each salute was fired 5 times, for a total of 45 shots from the 9 salutes. Represents the honor of 95. Your Majesty has appeared. Your Majesty, I love you. Countless girls on the street screamed. Long live His Majesty the Emperor. Long live Your Majesty. Countless people shouted enthusiastically and excitedly, and the waves of voices followed. The waiters from other countries on the viewing platform all scratched their ears. Damn, I feel like I'm going to be deafened. 2 rows of guards armed with P-40 submachine guns were lined up on both sides. A pair of black long-tube military boots stepped on the ground, and under the large-brimmed military cap was a very handsome face, and the left and right shoulder straps each had a dragon-shaped crimson wonderful pattern. From the right shoulder to the left waist, an ordinary armed belt is hung obliquely, which is compatible with the belt around the waist. Yuan appeared in a military uniform. My God, I'm better than Russia. Angel Zell, who was relatively close, stared wide-eyed. He always thought he was the most handsome among the elves, but unexpectedly, Yuan was better than him in appearance. After careful consideration, Yuan still decided to wear military uniform. One is that the military uniform is really handsome, and the other is that through this attire, other countries can know that the Ross Empire is also a military power, and that Yuan, the Emperor of the Ross Empire, is also a tough general. The red dragon badge on the black military cap with large brims exudes a strange red light under the sunlight. Yuan fiddled with the microphone on the platform with his white-gloved hand. This platform is also specially made. Below the platform is the magic supply device. Yuan is always holding a small remote control in his hand, which means that Yuan can open the magic shield at any time. This magic shield is supported by a large magic supply device, which can even resist shelling. Chapter 107 Long Live the Ross Empire. 7/7. P.S. 7th update. Today's update is finally over. Yuan was originally a very cautious person. My fellow citizens of the kingdom. Just as Yuan said something into the microphone, Yuan's words were released from the speakers all over the place, which startled the big knight under the Duke of Golden Lion who was sitting next to the speakers. He turned his head abruptly, with astonishment on his face. When did Yuan stand next to him? It's still as loud as it gets. But when he turned his head, he only saw a pitch-black iron box. The iron box was still making sounds. The big knight turned his head to look at the distant stage, only to see Yuan still standing there. He breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out to be some kind of loudspeaker equipment. His Majesty. Long live Your Majesty. Countless people at the scene waved the ribbons in their hands, and they shouted frantically and excitedly. The crowd gathered at the scene has already exceeded 300,000 people, and the number is still increasing. Almost every one of them is shouting excitedly, and the sound is so loud that people's ears ring. Liu's soldiers stood guard all over the scene to maintain order. Of course, all the people present prepared earmuffs in advance under the notice of Yuan, including several human kings and orc kings. Well, to put it simply, only the Grand Knight and other members of the Golden Lion Duke team did not prepare earmuffs. And the Big Knight and the others had very well-developed hearing, and the sudden burst of sound from the square hit their ears, making them stunned for an instant. They only felt humming in their minds, as if the whole brain had been submerged in the high tide of sea water, and waves of sound hit their eardrums one after another. My people, the kingdom of Ross has experienced 2 kings since its founding 100 years ago. We Ross people drifted from the sea and came to this continent. We have forgotten our past names and established the kingdom of Ross was born, and under the integration with other nations, the kingdom of Ross became stronger and stronger, to the point where it can now be called an empire. People, you also know how weak the country of Ross was in the past, you have also experienced poverty, and you have also experienced life and death. But when the country was in crisis, you did not abandon the country, and you were also the country's follow-up. Here, please let me, the current king of the Lost Kingdom, Gu Yuan III, express my heartfelt thanks to you. Gu Yuan took a step back and bowed deeply to all the people in the square. Your Majesty, please don't say that. Without you, Your Majesty, we would not be where we are today, let alone live such a rich life. Your Majesty can't. Your Majesty, without you, our family would have starved to death in the wilderness long ago. Seeing Gu Yuan bowing to them, countless people burst into tears, tears fell from their eyes, and shouted loudly with great excitement. My people, the kingdom of Ross has gone through countless hardships to come to where it is today. By today, I will be the emperor, and you will also be the people of the empire. No matter what enemies you face, the empire can defeat them, and the footsteps of the empire will never stop. Here, on June 8, 12,056 of the exorcism, the third king of my kingdom of Ross, announced that the kingdom of Ross has officially become the empire of Ross. I, Gu Yuan, will be the first emperor of the Ross Empire. The stars are immortal, and the universe rotates. The Ross Empire will be immortal. The flag of the Kong Empire will always fly in the sky. Long live the Ross Empire. Gu Yuan clasped both sides of the podium in front of him with both white-gloved hands, and he shouted passionately. At this moment, not only the people shouted wildly and excitedly, but even the troops entering the field shouting loudly. Long live my emperor. The Ross Empire is immortal. Long live my emperor. The Ross Empire is immortal. Rows of soldiers carrying 98K on their shoulders lined up neatly, forming a market formation from the wide road to the central square of the factory. The neat rows of pitch-black steel helmets looked so deep under the sunlight, and they were shaking in unison. Cross, 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 0, ask for flowers. The uniform black long military boots stepped on the ground, making loud footsteps. The 98K bayonet shines brightly under the sun in the sky. Imperial Army. Forward. A standing officer passed by his soldiers in the ranks of soldiers. He drew out the long sword at his waist and shouted loudly. He straightened his body, stepped on the ground with black long military boots, and walked with his steps. Go forward with the army. It turned out to be such a powerful army. On the viewing platform, all the envoys and the kings of other countries stared wide-eyed and said in shock. There is no doubt that the army pays attention to discipline, and group warfare pays more attention to this. 0.00. But looking at the army on the field now, all movements are uniform. From this aspect, it shows their discipline. A strong army may not be disciplined, but a disciplined army must be strong. Quote exclamation mark quote. An officer shouted these words loudly, and the long swords in the hands of the officers next to each soldier's phalanx waved a frightening arc in the air, slashing down from the air. Along with their movements, all the soldiers slapped the 98K with their left hand on the shoulder with their right hands, then transferred the 98K from the left shoulder to the right shoulder, and finally slammed forward. The tip of the 98K upper bayonet is facing the back of the head of the comrade in front. The actions of all the soldiers are uniform, vigorous and resolute, which is shocking. It's just that the soldiers are very disciplined, it doesn't mean anything. The great knight in the Golden Lion Duke's team took a deep breath, and spoke sourly as if eating lemons. When the military parade was held in the city of Ross, another Ross army of 100,000 people sneaked across the border between the Ross Empire and the Gutongxi Alliance Empire. Following Gu Yuan's orders, they crossed the border and raided the Golden Lion Duke's territory. They will give the Duke of Golden Lion a big surprise. Gu Genichi never likes to be passive, he likes to be preemptive. Chapter 108 One Country vs. Hundreds. 1/7, please subscribe. P.S. The first update, there are 6 more updates today. The phalanx of soldiers walked slowly, and their neat formation and uniform movements showed their strong discipline. Moreover, they are all soldiers who have killed people on the battlefield, and their every move is full of evil spirits, especially when they just slashed their guns. They are even more majestic and full of murderous aura. Cross, 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 cross. The hard soles of the black long military boots fell to the ground neatly, and the sound was endless. After the soldiers passed by, all the guests and messengers, as well as the kings, heard the humming in unison. They looked suspiciously at the direction they came from, but their eyes widened when they looked. I saw 2 trucks passing by side, and the trucks were full of soldiers. Behind these 2 trucks, there are countless trucks passing, 187, slowly. At a glance, you can only see the steel body of the truck and the neatly arranged helmets of the soldiers sitting on it. This kind of steel creation. If it appears on the battlefield, I'm afraid no one can resist it. Wallace IV and Guns 3 looked at each other, and saw horror in each other's eyes. They seemed to be able to see the steel monster called a truck crushing the enemy's body on the battlefield, and then the soldiers continue to come down from it. That's really scary. But it's not over yet. After the troop-carrying queue of trucks passed by, the hum of the engine was still heard endlessly. I saw 2 huge steel monsters slowly appearing from the street. They looked heavy, but their bodies were covered with steel, and there was this long pipe above them. 2 T-34s slowly appeared from the street, and the engines hummed. What kind of monster is this? Look at the steel on your body, it's thicker than the one that carried soldiers just now. Everyone's eyes widened, their mouths grew wide, and their lower lips trembled unconsciously. This weapon. Subscribe to Chinese novel Audio Wave. Suddenly the beast orc who was first frightened by the sound of the salute screamed, his body was trembling, and there was fear in his eyes. On the battlefield, countless companions fled wailing, but a huge number of these identical giant steel beasts appeared on the battlefield, their thick bodies ruthlessly crushing the bodies of his companions. And before they died, they were crushed into meat paste. The wailing of the tragic death echoed in his heart and never went away. And the huge sound from above is like the artillery before, there is also a rush of sound. As long as it keeps ringing, the companions around him will suddenly burst and fall to the ground to die. Any of their attacks are useless on that steel monster, and they can't even leave a mark, it's too scary. Terrible. He stared straight at it, as if the whole person would not move, and muttered in his mouth. The big knight stared at the 2 queues of tanks that lined up on the road and moved forward. Even if this kind of steel monster was crushed on his body, he would definitely not be able to bear it. Not to mention fighting in groups on the battlefield. It is impossible for anyone to resist the footsteps of this steel monster. No body of flesh and blood can resist the advance of this steel monster. After the tank cluster slowly drove past, the anti-aircraft machine guns and artillery were all pulled by the truck and passed slowly. During this period, countless people shouted loudly, "Behold, this is the army of their empire. How mighty, how overwhelming. Any enemy who wants to stand in the way of the empire will be crushed by the empire. Long live the Loth Empire. Long live His Majesty the Emperor." Countless waves of cheers and shouts came one after another. At this time Yuan spoke again. "People, be quiet. People of the Empire, be quiet." After the 2 beeps, the square gradually fell silent, and everyone looked excitedly at Yuan on the distant platform. On the viewing stand, a knight in the Golden Lion Duke's team had a sharp look in his eyes, and his hand was on the hilt of his waist. But he was stopped by a big knight next to him. He shook his head and said in a low voice, "We can't have any chance of winning now. The total strength of Ross in this place is probably 100,000. But, this may be the closest we've ever been to him in our lives." He said in a deep voice, "Zero. I believe in the Duke of the Golden Lion will never be defeated by anyone." The great knight lowered his hand and shook his head. After a moment of silence, he finally gave up the idea of assassinating Yuan. "Everyone, my empire, our empire, will eventually grow bigger and bigger, but now, there is an enemy blocking our way forward." As soon as Yuan's words came out, all the people were furious. They shouted all kinds of words, but they all had the same meaning, that is to completely crush the enemy. The big knight suddenly widened his eyes on the viewing platform, and fixedly stared at Gu Yuan, who was standing on the platform across a wide road in the distance. That is the Golden Lion Principality of the ancient Tongxi Alliance Empire. As soon as Gu Yuan said these words, unlike the angry crowd, the kings and envoys of various countries in the stands all stared wide-eyed. Gu Yuan, what is he trying to do? So, I, the first emperor of the Ross Empire, decided to go to war with the Principality of the Golden Lion. Wow! When these words were spoken, all the kings who came to envoy were in an uproar. But in front of the more excited people, they all seemed so inferior. Here, I, Gu Yuan, the emperor of the Ross Empire, also have something to say to all the envoys and King 0.1. If you want to break away from the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, and want to break away from the Golden Lion Duke and maintain your independence, then I, the Ross Empire, will definitely support you. As soon as Gu Yuan said these words, the envoys from more than a dozen countries, the king's eyes all widened. What is Gu Yuan trying to do? Does he want to use the power of one country to contend against the entire huge Gutongxi Alliance Empire? Crazy, crazy, this is one country against 100 countries. The king was sweating all over his body, and he slumped on a chair. HMPH ha 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 ha. The arrival of the Duke of Golden Lion made the great knight laugh at the moment, but the extreme anger was suppressed in this laughter. One country against 100 countries. Overreaching. He stood up abruptly from his seat. Chapter 109. Who is so powerful? 2/7. P.S. The second update, and the fifth update. P.S. For the book friends who are still in school these days, it seems that they are going to take an exam, right? I don't know if the readers of this book have taken the exam. Once again, the author wishes all readers who are taking the exam to have good grades in the exam. I hope that every reader who subscribes will be full of happiness and have a happy new year. Question mark. P.S. The author hereby wishes everyone an early year. Vom and the other 6 orc kings, come forward. Gu Yuan's words stunned everyone on the viewing platform. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of thousands of people at the scene, Vom got off the viewing stand, and walked towards Gu Yuan with excitement in his heart. The other 6 orc kings also looked at each other in blank dismay, and went up with Vom. Orcs. Why did your majesty tell the orcs to go up? Who knows? Many people started whispering. His Majesty. Under the watchful eyes of countless guard soldiers standing upright, Valmu and the other 6 orc kings came in front of Gu Yuan. They knelt on one knee and shouted at Gu Yuan. Wowum, I want you to swear allegiance to me now. Oh 9. Gu Yuan looked down at the 7 orcs and said. We who are not as good as you are loyal to you who are much better than us. Your Majesty, the point of your sword is the target of our attack. We will abide by our oath unswervingly until death. Your enemy is our enemy, your target is our target, your Majesty, please accept our allegiance. Waomu was the first to kneel down to Gu Yuan, and the other 6 orc kings also made the same move. I, the Emperor of the Ross Empire, accept your allegiance. Gu Yuan stretched out his hand, bent down, and gently placed it on Waomu's head. Excuse me. It turned out to be true. I just heard about it, but I didn't expect that the several kingdoms split from the Orc Empire would actually attack the Ross Empire. The Ross Empire sends troops, and the 7 Orc kingdoms will definitely send troops. Then where are we standing? All the kings on the platform looked at each other, wavering. Although the Gutongxi Alliance Empire is said to have a population of hundreds of millions, it is actually calculated by adding up all the countries. Except for the Gutongxi Empire itself and other countries controlled by the Grand Duke of the Gutongxi Empire, more than half of the remaining countries are actually vacillating and not so firm. Hearing the whispers of the kings over there, and the faint words that they wanted to betray the Gutongxi Empire, everyone in the team sent by the Duke of Golden Lion gritted their teeth and stared angrily. Vom, as the most loyal vassal state to the Empire, I will reward you. Gu Genichi beckoned, and several soldiers pushed a heavy object to the front of Waomu. Wam raised his head, surprise suddenly burst out in his eyes. Gun. I saw that the heavy object in front of it was made of bronze as a whole, and there were many iron hoops fixed on the thick muzzle. There are 2 wheels on both sides. Although it looks very different from the cannon used by the Ross Empire, it should indeed be a cannon. This 24-pound bronze infantry cannon and its manufacturing method are the rewards given to you by the Empire. In public, Yuan bestowed the cannon on Yuan. The production method of the 24-pound bronze cannon that Yuan bestowed on Yuan was actually at the level of the 17th to 18th centuries of the previous life. It takes at least a few minutes to fire a cannon, and the range is about 1,300 meters. Although it is far less than the range of 20 to 30 kilometers of the artillery of Yuan's army, it is a killer weapon for the general army of this era. Facing groups of infantry, once this kind of artillery fires, the solid iron balls will hit a whole row. In short, it can directly create a path of flesh and blood. Yuan bestowed the cannon, and immediately, the other 6 orc kings looked at Yuan with envy and jealousy. This is a weapon bestowed by the Empire. Such a weapon must be very powerful. I really envy the Wakan kingdom to get such a thing. As long as we firmly stand on the side of the Ross Empire, I believe we will get a report. Wallace IV and Gunther III spoke to each other. The other kings also looked at each other. They didn't understand the power of artillery, but they heard that it was terrifying. The cannon of the Ross Empire. The great knight of the Duke of Golden Lion and the knights all looked at each other, seeing greed in their eyes. Nodding to each other, they seemed to have decided on a plan of action. The enthronement ceremony was simple, and after speeches and military parades, and the oath of allegiance to the 7 kingdoms of the orcs, it was over. Regarding this ceremony, the envoys from various countries remembered nothing, they only remembered 2 things. 1. The army of the Ross Empire is very powerful, and once that kind of steel behemoth enters the battlefield, it will be an extremely terrifying existence. The second is that the Ross Empire wants to go to war with the Duke of Golden Lion's Golden Lion Principality and provoke the entire Gutongxi Alliance Empire. I believe that after they go back, they will spread all these things. That night, rest area for envoys from various countries. Although all the envoys and kings can leave, they still want to stay in Los Angeles for a few days. Without him, it was the prosperity of Ross City that captivated their eyes. Compared with the country, the prosperity of Ross City and all kinds of novelty things made them think that they had come to heaven. This is a scene that has never been seen in the imperial capital of the Gutongxi Alliance. So they decided, 240, have a good time in Los Angeles for a few days before going back. In Los Angeles these days, any commoner who goes to the streets may meet a king or a noble from another country on the street. These people have been dazzled by the prosperity of Ross City. In the past few days alone, they have spent a lot of money buying various items. Of course, the place where you spend the most money is eating. Yuan opened an expensive restaurant in the city of Los Angeles, which only officers above the regiment level in the army can afford. These restaurants are also used by Yuan as a place to receive kings from various countries for meals. It was close to the early hours of the night, and Wallace IV and Guns III were still enjoying a delicious supper in the restaurant, accompanied by kings from several other countries. Boom! Suddenly there was a loud bang. Scared so much that the red wine in the goblet in Wallace IV's hand was spilled. What happened? They screamed. On the street in front of the restaurant, a half-figure flew out instantly. Then it hit the ground heavily, but it turned out to be a body that had been divided into 2. Wallace IV rushed out to have a look, and was shocked. Isn't that man a great knight in the team of the Duke of Golden Lion? Who is so powerful, who can forcibly break the big knight into 2 pieces? Chapter 110 The Great Stealing Knight. 3/7. P.S. The 3rd update, and the 4th update. A few minutes ago. Wakan Kingdom resting place. Several hazy figures appeared outside the room. Under the illumination of the light, they appeared to be so blurry, as if a few people with extremely low quality suddenly appeared in the 1080p video, almost to the point of pixel wind. Is it here? One of them asked sideways. It's here, that's right. Alright then, go in and steal the blueprint of the cannon. Another person nodded, said. If you want to say who they are several great knights in the team sent by the Duke of Golden Lion. There are also magicians in their team. After the magicians cast a few spells on them to conceal their identities, they came here like this. Huh. The door is open. A big knight frowned, pushing the door with one hand. The wooden door opened with a break. There's no one in there. He glanced inside, but there was no one there. It should be a restaurant to eat. This is a good opportunity, let's go in and steal. The three big knights looked at each other, and they entered the door. As soon as they entered the door, they saw the 24-pounder bronze infantry gun in the shadows. This bronze cannon was specially built by Yuan. Among other things, the first thing is to be beautiful. How can you, a group of lowly mortals in the Luo's Empire army, be on an equal footing with the noble us? There are such weapons, which are so beautiful. I have never seen such a strange magic pattern, and there is no magic power fluctuation, so can fool everyone. The big knight stood in front of the bronze cannon, and he looked at this exquisite bronze cannon with greed in his eyes. It was covered with patterns, but in the eyes of the knight, the decorative patterns turned into some special magic runes. Because in his cognition, everything that exceeds the power of the human body is magic, and other powers cannot exist. And why the weapons of the Ross Empire did not have the slightest magical fluctuations. When he saw this bronze cannon, he thought he understood. He thinks that the pattern on it is actually some kind of special magic rune that hides the fluctuation of magic power, so there is no magic fluctuation. Don't blame him for being stupid, it's because things like guns and artillery are beyond his cognition. Now, such a weapon will be ours. When we create such a powerful weapon, it will be impossible for the lowly mortals of the Naros Empire to compete with the noble us. The big knight stood touching the muzzle of the bronze cannon with a look of intoxication. Okay, don't waste time, quickly find the manufacturing blueprint, it must be here. If there is no manufacturing blueprint, we can't take such a big guy with us. Another big knight patted his companion who was obsessed with artillery, and said, "There is another room inside, I'll go and have a look." He turned around and walked towards the inner room. But when he arrived at the door of the room and was about to open the door, he suddenly had a huge vigilance in his heart. He tried to escape, but it was too late. A loud noise came from the inside of the room, and a solid iron ball smashed through the wooden door at a speed that the big knight couldn't even react to, and then hit the big knight directly. The whole body of the big knight was instantly split into two pieces by the shell. Then he flew out of the room. The big knight thought that he could dodge the moment he felt danger, but he was wrong. The ejection speed of this bronze cannon was no slower than that of a pistol. And we can often see some plots on TV, such as a person being pointed at by a pistol, and the moment the enemy shoots, he tilts his head instantly and avoids the bullet. In fact, this is impossible, because based on the speed of the pistol at the moment it is released from the chamber, the speed at which he tilted his head would have to be at least 3 times the speed of sound to completely dodge the bullet. Even if you dodge 1 second before the opponent shoots, it is impossible to dodge, because it is impossible for a person to pass the bullet quickly. Here is also the same principle. The moment the gun was fired, he dodged to the side. According to the research report of the Science and Technology Research Department of the Ross Empire, the Great Knight's physical fitness is 4 times that of ordinary humans, and he is also proficient in various fighting and killing techniques. Simply put, he is a weakened version of the American captain wearing armor in the Middle Ages. And the big knight doesn't have the aura of the protagonist. The speed of the cannon ejection was so fast that he was hit instantly while he was still in midair, and his whole body was cut in 2. The body that had been turned into 2 pieces was blasted out of the room in an instant, and half of the body fell onto the street like this. What happened? Wallace IV and Gunther III looked at the corpses falling on the street. They cried out, "Ha ha ha ha, Your Majesty is still very clever, he has already guessed that you bastards are coming to steal things." Walmu was wearing a heavy suit, and he walked out of the broken wooden door with a smile, and there was a bronze cannon inside. However, the power of this kind of cannon still scares me. It can directly split a big knight in 2, tisk tisk. **hole. So Yuan gave you the cannon on purpose in public. The remaining 2 great knights instantly understood why Yuan did this. To lure them to steal. You, lowly things. They shouted angrily, and each drew out the long swords around their waists. You guys are powerful knights, don't I? Don't underestimate us orcs. Wam roared angrily, and took out a sharp and frightening axe from behind. Go to hell. 2 big knights attacked suddenly, dead jout, each of them wielding their long swords, and their targets were all the gaps in the heavy armor on Wam's body. Their speed is extremely fast, and they are very precise. If they are stabbed by them, then Waumu will be crippled. Small idea. Wam swung the battle axe in his hand violently, as if to cut off the attacking long sword, but he suddenly moved to the side, revealing the room behind him. What? Not good. The two were shocked, and at this moment they had already seen what was inside. Inside are two lost soldiers with steel helmets, iron masks, and submachine guns. But when Vom got out of the way and they saw clearly what was inside, the Ross soldiers had already fired ahead of time. Chug chug. The powerful firepower from the two submachine guns instantly smashed the two big knights into sieves. Chapter 111 Lowly Under the Moonlight. 4/7. P.S. Today is the 4th chapter, and there are 3 more chapters. 2 pairs of long military boots stepped on the ground full of sawdust and blood, and 2 Ross soldiers came out with submachine guns in hand. The physical fitness of these big knights is really terrifying, and the nerve reaction is too fast. A soldier sighed under his iron face. Yeah, look, we've already shot as early as possible. If we shot earlier, our friendly troops would be injured. Then look at them. Only half of their bodies have bullets. What does that mean? Another soldier kicked the 2 bodies on the ground. This shows that the 2 big knights still made dodge actions at the moment when the 2 Ross soldiers risked injuring their friendly troops and shot ahead of time. They were hit by bullets just as their bodies dodged halfway in the air. I don't want to have a bayonet fight with this horrible guy, there is absolutely no chance of winning. And you don't want to get close to them with a gun, because you might be killed by them before you can shoot. Ross soldiers sighed. This time it was luck, and it was a sneak attack. If they met face to face at close range in an open area, the 2 Ross soldiers thought they might be dead. At this time, an officer walked in from the door. He glanced around, then nodded to the 2 Ross soldiers, and said, "Clean up all their corpses." 457. At the same time, the Golden Lion Duke's team was resting. The places where they were arranged were very different from the places where other missions lived. It can be said that one is in the south of the city and the other is in the east of the city. Why haven't they come back? A great knight who stayed behind was wearing armor and leaning against the wall in the room, frowning. There's nothing wrong with them, is there? A knight is eating a can of fruit with a spoon. Probably not. After all, they can't know in advance that we will send someone to steal things. The other knight sitting across from him shook his head. That's true. At this moment, the big knight leaning against the wall suddenly stopped talking, and even the sound of his breathing became weaker. He listened intently, his face suddenly changed. Not good. Let's go. After saying this, he jumped out of the window. What? The 2 knights who were eating and the other knights in the room were taken aback. Call out! Call out! Suddenly, 2 sounds of breaking through the air sounded, and 2 rockets rushed into the room instantly with their tail flames. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the whole house collapsed instantly, crushing all the knights below. Without even screaming, they were directly crushed to death by the ruins of the house. Damn it, the action is exposed. The big knight who broke through the window in advance rolled over on the ground, then raised his head suddenly and said while gnashing his teeth. The Imperial Army is arresting criminals, and all Imperial residents are requested to hide at home and not come out. The Imperial Army is arresting criminals, and all Imperial residents are requested to hide at home and not come out. Across the 2 streets, there were soldiers of Ross constantly shouting. The rest place for the Golden Lion Duke's team was specially arranged by Yuan. The surrounding streets were originally where construction workers lived, but they were all transferred to build the port before, so there was no one around. But I also have to tell the other residents who are 2 streets away. Here's one running. A Ross soldier shouted, and another MP-40 submachine gun in the hands of another Ross soldier opened fire. How come there are these damned mortals here at the back door? The big knight opened his eyes angrily, he stretched out his hand suddenly, and shot out a magic shield. At the same time, the magic rune armor on his body automatically formed 2 layers of shields, and 3 layers of shields. When he moved his body, 3 shields shot out within 1 second. More than 10 meters. Some bullets from the MP-40 submachine gun hit the shield on his body, but failed to penetrate. Wow! Under the illumination of the yellow incandescent lights on the street, 2 sword lights flashed across in an instant. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Two Ross soldiers were cut off with their submachine guns in their hands. Too weak, too weak. The great knight, AJDC, let out a joyful cry. Facing the dozens of Ross soldiers running quickly from the entrance of the street, he opened his arms, the three shields on his body were shining, and the long sword in his hand was stained with blood in the light. Under the light, it emitted a strange light. You damned mortals, it is estimated that the three people who went to steal the blueprint of the artillery were also dealt with by you. You already knew what the Duke wanted to do, didn't you? Facing his roar, no soldier answered him, all the soldiers were looking at him with cold and dead eyes. The iron masks on their faces made it hard to see what their expressions were. Fire! An officer suddenly gave an order, and immediately, all the weapons in the hands of the field soldiers opened fire. 98K, MP-40 submachine gun, and bazooka rocket launcher. You lowly mortals, you only use this kind of weapon without chivalry. He roared angrily, jumped up on the spot, and then tapped the roofs of the streets on both sides, avoiding in all directions. Obviously, he also knew that he absolutely couldn't resist such intensive firepower. Dang 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 dang, the continuous sound came, which made the great knight feel infinitely frightened. How fast is the weapon on the opposite side? His speed has reached the extreme, but there are still bullets that can hit him, but fortunately, it is not strong enough to break through the three-layer shield. Even if I die, I will kill you all. He let out a roar again, and the whole person jumped up from the roof in an instant, hanging on the crescent moon in the sky. All Ross soldiers raised their heads and saw the figure of the great knight jumping up into the sky instantly like a phantom fairy in the night, as if blending into the night sky. In the dark night, under the waning moon, the great knight stretched his hands open, receiving the moonlight all over his body, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he instantly fell down. First, in the distant sky, Tanya's small figure is floating in midair, the red dragon badge on the black military cap with large brims on her head exudes a strange luster under the moonlight, her long golden hair is fluttering in the night sky, right there seemed to be a flashing crosshair in the pupil, and there was a faint magic floating around her. There are magic supply devices hanging on both sides of the body. And what she held in her hand was a gigantic firearm. Tanya is only 1.3 meters tall, but the gun she holds in her hand is more than 2 meters long. L3920M anti-magic sniper rifle. The barrel of the huge 20mm caliber gun glowed in the dark night. With the help of the magic power of the magic power supply device, she was able to hold such a large gun steadily. Under the dark night, the small body of Meng Ya, who was suspended in the air, formed an extremely strong contrast with the 2-meter-long steel spear in her hand, which was less than 10 meters long. Chapter 112 Girl Mobile Unit. 5/7. P.S. For the 5th update, the author will have to go out now, and the remaining 2 updates will be updated at 10 o'clock. P.S. The author created a QQ skirt. Readers who want to add it can add it. The mysterious number, 5197126668. P.S. The author is here to wish all the readers an early year in advance. Thank you all the readers for your support during this period of time. Boom. She shot. Huge and incomparable gunshots resounded through the surrounding sky, and a burst of flame and smoke from the muzzle exploded instantly, forming a simple gust of wind. The cartridge case ejected from the barrel. Just the bullet casing, Tanya can't hold it with one hand. Boom. From the perspective of all Luosi soldiers, the big knight jumped up in the sky under the waning moon. In the next moment, the flesh and blood wrapped in armor fragments exploded in the sky. It splashed all the soldiers below. The huge power of the 20mm anti-tank gun directly pierced through 3 layers of armor on his body, and shattered his whole body by the way. And after the shot was fired, accompanied by the loud sound of the gun, Tanya was also shocked by the recoil and moved back half a meter in the air in an instant. This is on the premise that there is a good shock absorber on the magic power supply device. What kind of weapon? The Japanese gun directly blows people up. The power of this shot shocked even the Ross soldiers below. They wiped their masks and helmets and were spattered with blood and minced meat, or internal organs, throwing it to the ground in disgust. As a result, at this moment, following the army all the time, the doctor who had been hiding before rushed out from some corner, shouting, "Don't throw it! Don't throw it! Any flesh and blood of a great knight is useful." As he said that, He put on his gloves and looked at the pile of minced meat on the ground as if looking at his girlfriend, and then carefully collected them into a box that he carried with him. The flesh and blood and corpses of these great knights can all extract number 1 compound agent, they are all treasures. He picked up the flesh and blood, as if he had picked up a gold coin, and said in a fanatical tone. At this time, a small figure descended from the sky. She was very petite, and she was wearing a military uniform 1 size smaller. On both sides of her slender legs were 2 black rectangular boxes. There was an iron block supporting the link on the back, on 2 boxes. There are exoskeleton-like iron leggings on the legs, and the black leather boots on the feet are also wrapped in a layer of steel. I saw Tanya lightly landed from the sky, the blue flame sprayed out from the steel plate under her feet was slightly extinguished, her silver eyes glanced at the doctor, her petite body less than 1.3 meters moved, and she carried the 2-meter-long the L3920 MIM anti-magic sniper rifle, anti-tank sniper rifle. It was thrown on the doctor's body. Ah! The doctor screamed and was knocked to the ground by a sniper rifle more than 2 meters long. This sniper rifle weighs at least 50 kilograms. And the General 98K weighs only 4 caddies. A group of Ross soldiers over there were all dumbfounded, and the picture in front of them had a great impact on them. A cold loli who was less than 1.3 meters tall held a huge rifle more than 2 meters long in her hand, and then threw it casually, knocking down a man who seemed to be 1.8 meters tall. Everyone has to feel a little unreal in front of the contrasting picture. This is our magic mobile unit. An officer rubbed his chin and murmured. The envoys sent by the Duke of Golden Lion in Rose City were completely wiped out by Rose's army. The 10 knights of the messenger group and the 4 great knights all died. On the other hand, only 2 ordinary soldiers died on the Ross army side. Yuan declared war on the Duke of the Golden Lion before the Duke of the Golden Lion declared war on him, and the envoys sent by the Duke of the Golden Lion were naturally unnecessary. After all, the envoy sent by the Duke of Golden Lion to deliver gifts was also to paralyze Yuan. The Duke of Golden Lion is playing a double game. While sending people to give gifts, saying that I have no hostility towards you, while continuing to mobilize the army and assemble the army. 0. Thanks to Yuan's well-developed intelligence network, he discovered that the Duke of Golden Lion has been targeting the Ross Empire to gather troops. Judging from various reports, it is indeed going to attack the Ross Empire, otherwise there are no other countries nearby. It is worth the Duke of Golden Lion's full deployment of troops. Fortunately, Yuan found out in time, otherwise he would have been deceived by the trick played by the Golden Lion Duke, and really thought that the Golden Lion Duke wanted to express his goodwill to him and want to reconcile. Night, Sky King. More than a dozen half-orc girls with huge guns in their hands were flying back and forth in the sky. Their heights range from 1.5 to 1.7 meters. The weapons in hand include L3920 sniper rifle, bazooka and other weapons. There was a great contrast between the delicate body and the steel-like weapon in his hand. It also makes people feel a little cute. How about it? A half-orc girl with long legs, thin waist and fair skin asked the radio on the shoulder. Check it out, there is indeed a 300,000-strong army of the Duke of Golden Lion stationed in front, and there are 600 magicians among them, 100 of which have magic power supply devices, and the shields on their bodies are also double shields. The 98K is very difficult to break. A voice came from the intercom. I see. The half-orc girl with long legs, thin waist and white skin nodded slightly, and said to the walkie-talkie, "Okay, you retreat, let's go back and recharge the battery, and then wait for the order to launch a sneak attack." Clear. The voice on the walkie-talkie stopped, and the long-legged, thin-skinned half-orc girl took off the scarf around her neck in the night sky, and breathed a sigh of relief. They are really stationed in front, it seems that they are really not afraid of the Empire's sneak attack. Ah. As soon as the scarf was removed, there was a trace of stitching on the exposed white neck. Looking at the other half-orc girls, there are more or less stitched scars on their delicate bodies. They are half-orc girls who Yuan rescued from the test site of the Orc Empire. Chapter 113 What is the difference between a knight and a demon? 6/7. P.S. The 6th update, and one more update. In a small town, there are 300,000 troops of the Duke of Golden Lion stationed here. This is the territory of a mortal country. The villagers in the original town were basically killed and ran away by them. Now an army of 300,000 has occupied the town. In fact, among the 300,000 troops, only 20,000 are directly under the Duke of the Golden Lion. The 20,000 knight army includes 500 dragon knights, 600 magician troops, and 100 of the magicians are equipped with slaves. The magic power supply device imported by the domain. The rest are servants of mortal nations. As a major duke of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, the Duke of the Golden Lion is naturally closer to the distance domain. The closer the countries are to the central territory, each of them regards themselves as a master, a class of magicians. The farther they are from the central territory, the more they look down on others, thinking that they are all mortals, and that they and others are a class of magicians that surpass mortals. But 583 didn't know that they were the same as those mortals in the eyes of the people in Zhongyu. But they are also proud of themselves. Outside a private house in the town. Hans, come on, drink. A knight in armor embossed with magical runes removes his visor. What good is drinking? Do you want to try the ground coffee I brought from my hometown? Knight Hans smiled, and he took out a lot of special black powder from his arms. Then pour into a cup and rinse with hot water. Bah, Hans, your ground coffee is so bad that you'd rather drink it. The man spit it out after taking a sip, looked at him and said, I really don't know why you like this kind of bad drink. Don't talk if you don't understand, this is a good thing. Hans hurriedly grabbed the cup of ground coffee, drank it in one gulp, and said, this kind of thing is unpleasant to drink at first, but it's like life, it's bitter at first, and the more you drink, you'll feel. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly heard a knight next to him say, the more you drink, the more you will feel bad. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha, John is right. It caused the people around to laugh again. The knight who spoke at the beginning took a sip of the wine. This wine has a high alcohol content and is produced in the Baiju of the Ross Empire. The merchants of the Ross Empire gave this wine a nice name, Dragon Drunk, which means that the dragon will get drunk even after drinking it. But in Ji Yuan's previous life, the earth was actually Erguotu, or Erguotu with a temperature of more than 70 degrees. Although there is magic in this era, magic cannot do everything. Just like this brewing, now not only the neighboring countries, but even the central region, there are many goods from the Ross Empire in circulation, and they occupy the mainstream market. I really don't understand why the Duke waited until all the troops were assembled before launching an attack. The knight took a sip of Dragon Drunk, feeling a bit over the top, he shook his head and said. Obviously, even if it's just us, that's enough. Isn't it just a mere mortal country? I can go up alone and kill 200 mortal soldiers. He stood up and shouted, dissatisfied with himself. You're drunk. Hans persuaded. Drunk? How is it possible, just relying on the wine brewed by these lowly mortals? Yule sneered, and he stood up unsteadily, the armor on his body clanging, looking at the bottle of wine from the Ross Empire in his hand. It clearly reads in common script, produced in the town of Sloan in the Ross Empire. How can I get drunk with these lowly, mortal things? Who am I? I am a knight. I am a knight Yule. He yelled. You guys, do you still remember how I killed the untouchables in these towns who didn't want to leave during the day? Hey. His hand wrapped in iron armor pointed to his companions around him. You're got drunk with mortal wine. Ha 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 ha. The surrounding knights didn't care at all, instead they booed and shouted one by one. Only Hans felt a little sad. He had always been a kind person, but he couldn't help himself in the army. He could only watch those ordinary townspeople being driven out and killed. Although being expelled can temporarily keep them alive, but in this world, can they live well if they lose their home and wander outside? Hans wanted to help them, but tens of thousands of townspeople were driven away and killed. Hans' meager help was of no use at all. Hans sighed, maybe the Duke of Golden Lion's army is not where he wants to be. When will he truly find an army that loves the people like a son and truly does not kill, plunder, or discriminate against civilians? Perhaps, such an army does not exist at all. Suddenly Hans thought of the few country knights who swore to protect the town to the death. Although there were only a few of them, and even their armor was not complete, but under the leadership of their lord, the Baron, a few country knights and hundreds of militiamen, dare to launch a charge against the 300,000 troops here. But they were easily killed. Even the head of the Lord Baron is still hanging on the outer city wall. Yes, such an army still exists, but it is too weak. Hans kept the last piece of Pure Land in his heart, and he silently stayed away from Yuan, who was drunk and talking about it. Listening to Yuan talking about how the girl resisted and how he easily her, Hans suddenly felt unknown, and a burst of anger surged up. Are these beasts still human? They think they are nobles, they think they are not mortals, but they call themselves noble knights, so what is the difference between them and the demons that ravaged the world many years ago? Yul. Hans came to Yul, grabbed his neck, and shouted angrily, "Shut up. Are you angry? Are you angry when I say this? What are you pretending to be?" Yul laughed out loud. At this time, the sword light suddenly flashed. Yul's expression stiffened immediately. He clutched his throat, and the blood sprayed out uncontrollably, splashing on the rune armor on Hans' body. Unbelievable. Yul opened his eyes wide and looked at Hans, who was covered in his blood all over his head and face. Hans, you're crazy. All the knights looked at Hans covered in blood and holding a long sword in horror. 5.1 The other knights all drew their long swords from their waists and shouted at Hans, "Hans! Are you crazy?" "No, I'm not crazy. I'm just saving my last conscience as a human being." Hans' face was covered with blood, his expression was ferocious and angry. "Those lowly mortals are like pigs, how can they match?" A knight sneered. "Since you want to go to hell with those mortals, then go to hell." More than a dozen knights held awe-inspiring swords and bright armors. They rushed towards Hans and wanted to kill him on the spot. "Bring it on." Hans closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and was ready to die. Since there is no army worthy of his allegiance in this world, then such a life is worth living. Call out. Boom. Just at this moment, there was a loud noise, and the flames exploded in the surroundings, instantly boiling up. Chapter 114 Knight's Retribution. 7/7. P.S. The 7th update. Today's update is over. Boom, boom, boom. Countless flames and explosions sounded in countless surrounding areas instantly. What happened? We are attacked by magicians. Where are our magicians? Let them find the enemy. Where is the enemy? There were countless screams and roars, and countless soldiers ran out of the houses and tents screaming. They didn't even wear full armor, and what's more, they were directly crushed to death by the collapsed house in their sleep. Explosions continued to sound, countless houses collapsed, soldiers and knights screamed, and countless flames produced by the explosion flickered the dark sky. Hans was lying on the ground, with short blonde hair, gray hair, and blood on his head. He struggled to get up from the ground of 09, shaking his drowsy, humming head. 43. He got up from the ground, and the blood stains on the delicate rune armor on his body were also turned into black-gray by the raised dust, and he looked extremely embarrassed. There was a clanging sound as the armor collided, and he stood up from the ground in a daze, looking at the chaotic surroundings, and the knights lying on the ground, screaming in pain, who were very proud just a moment ago. A knight struggled to crawl on the ground. While screaming, he grabbed at random with his armored hands, but no matter what he grabbed, he could only grab a handful of dust. His lower body had been completely shattered by the explosion of the artillery. Hans turned around in a drowsy state, only to see that the knights who had drawn their swords against him just now were all lying on the ground, either dead or mutilated, and he was the only one who was lucky. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Hans laughed suddenly, and his laughter became more and more crazy, more and more hysterical. Retribution. This is all retribution. Ha 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 ha. He roared frantically at the corpses of knights on the ground and those who were seriously injured and survived. At this moment, his face was ashamed, his head was covered with blood stains that were stained black and gray by the dust, and the expression on his face was ferocious. At this moment, he was yelling like a madman. Put. Bang, 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 bang. An officer shouted loudly, and the cannons lined up roared again in turn. In the distant towns, flames were everywhere, and thunderous rumbles were heard endlessly. There are a total of 300 155 mm guns, and they are fired one after another. Countless cannonballs pierced the air and continued to fall towards the town with howls. Who the hell? Dozens of mages wearing special thick armor and robes lined with robes flew up from the town, and they fled to the sky, roaring. Rather than wearing armor on the front and back, it might be better to say that there are not so thick boxes hanging on the chest and back. There are strange magic runes flashing on the box, and there is a faint overflow of magic power. This is the magic power supply device of the Gutongxi Empire. B******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** even seeing their faces. "Find it for me." The leader of the magician unit roared and gave the order. There are hundreds of mages who can't fly on the ground. They are running around on the ground like headless chickens at this moment. Constant artillery fire explodes in the city instantly, and then takes away the lives of several soldiers, knights, or mages. The enemy's magician should also come out at this time. "Soldiers, go out and meet." At the artillery position of the Ross Empire, more than a dozen half-orc girls with magic power supply devices hanging on both sides of their waist stood up. They unplugged the plugs on the magic power supply devices and connected the other end to the generator. The headed half-orc girl is the tallest, with a height of 1.78 meters, fair skin and beautiful long legs, but there are traces of stitching on the skin on her body. She lifted the 2-meter-long giant gun placed on the ground, and flew into the sky first. There are also 2 half-orc girls about 1.5 meters tall. They are petite, but they carry a large box on their backs. The magic power supply devices on both sides of their legs are each equipped with a 14.5 mm caliber gun barrel. Each box has an ammo chain attached to it. Their magic power supply devices have been specially modified. They disassembled and refitted a 14.5 mm dual-mounted high-level dual-purpose machine gun and placed them on both sides, so that one 14.5 mm dual-mounted machine gun became 2 14.5 mm dual-mounted machine guns, a machine gun. They can stretch out their hands to control the machine guns on the left and right sides, which are used to suppress the enemy's large forces. There is also a half-orc girl carrying a bazooka rocket launcher on her shoulder, which is a blaster. This half-orc girl mobile unit has a total of 12 people. 2 machine gunners use 14.5 mm dual-link high-level dual-purpose machine guns, 5 snipers use L3920M anti-tank sniper rifles, and 5 blasters are slightly less, using a bazooka. This is the entire firepower configuration of this girl mobile unit. And their target is the enemy's magician mobile unit with nearly 100 people. Chapter 115, Dragon Knight Blocking Battle. 1/7. P.S. The first update, and the 6th update. Today's update seems a bit late. 10 kilometers away from the town, where the Dragon Knights are stationed, there are scattered tents in this open space, and there are hundreds of giant animals lying on the ground and resting, snorting, right. My lord, look at the town, our troops are under attack. Suddenly a giant dragon descended from the sky, fanning the strong wind, and there was a loud roar from above. 500 Dragon Knights, 500 giant dragons, because the minimum size of the dragon is more than 10 meters long, so they can't live in the town at all, and the Dragon Knights have to stay with their own dragons, so they don't have a camp together. Our troops are under attack. What's going on? Who is attacking us? The Dragon Knight who was resting in the tent ran out immediately, all shocked. It must be those damned mortals from Lost Country, who dare to take the initiative to attack us. Let them know our anger. The head of the Dragon Knight Legion sneered, and he jumped onto his giant dragon, pulled the reins, and shouted angrily, Aventus Fenris. Let's go. Wow. The dragon's wings snapped. This behemoth flew up directly and flew into the sky. Immediately afterwards, countless giant dragons soared up. They formed a series of huge dark clouds in the sky, a large piece of dark clouds in the dark night, which made people feel frightened. A place between the Dragon Knight's garrison and the army town. There are hundreds of trucks parked here. Each truck is equipped with a 14.58 mm dual-mounted dual-purpose machine gun. There were even soldiers carrying bazooka rocket launchers waiting in full force. They were all silent, and no one made any movement or light. Coming. An officer looked at the black cloud-like thing in the sky. Even here he could feel the gusts of strong wind coming from the sky. The scene of 500 giant dragons flying in the sky is terrifying, and the distance between them is also very wide, so it looks overwhelming. Listen to my order. The officer spoke over the intercom. Immediately, the soldiers on the truck with 14.5 mm dual-mounted high-level and dual-purpose machine guns were all ready for battle, and the deputy shooter next to him kept checking the ammunition. No problem. The deputy shooter gave the machine gunner a thumbs up. Learn. The machine gunner nodded with the iron face of his helmet on, immediately set up the machine gun and aimed it at the sky. Legion Commander, look below. In the sky, a dragon knight rode a giant dragon, shouting at the Legion Commander not far away. The face is black and dense, there is something. He shouted. Is there something? The Legion Commander looked down. I saw that the ground in the distance was indeed black and dense, with different ups and downs. Don't worry, do you think those lowly mortals have the strength to stop us? Ha 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 ha, don't be kidding, we are dragon knights, and the ones on the ground are in the shape of some hillsides. The Legion leader laughed and responded. You worry too much about Otto, those below look like some hillsides, they can't be mortal armies. A mortal army cannot have such a large weapon. The other dragon knights also laughed. The most important thing for us now is to go to the town to support our troops. Don't be distracted, hurry up. We are flying in the sky, and those damned mortals can't beat us. The head of the Legion shouted loudly, and the voice passed down in the sky. Yeah. An officer on the truck below was lying on the truck seat, with a large brimmed military cap covering his eyes. A smile suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth. Fire! Tut chug chug chug. In an instant, the first anti-aircraft machine gun fired. A raging flame suddenly flashed on the ground. Roar! A giant dragon roared in pain. Large scales of flesh and blood spilled from its body, and the whole giant dragon began to fall downwards. What happened? The dragon knight roared. The trucks below started to move, and hundreds of trucks moved together, and the sound of the engines could be heard far away in the dark night. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. While the truck was moving, the anti-aircraft machine guns loaded on the truck also roared. The enemy is below. A dragon knight uttered a thrilling cry. Shua! Wow! A bullet passed by in an instant, and his head wearing the iron helmet exploded like a watermelon, and the headless corpse fell directly on the dragon's back. Hundreds of anti-aircraft machine guns opened fire on the ground, and 500 dragon knights riding dragons in the sky suffered heavy casualties in an instant. Damn it! A dragon knight roared, and he swooped down towards the ground on his flying dragon. A hot flame brewed in the throat of the dragon's head. Shish! 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 Suddenly, several rockets with tail flames lifted into the air, and the swooping dragon hit several times of rockets head-on. Boom! An instant explosion sounded in the air, and the giant dragon fell from the sky with howling. The Legion commander was covering his left shoulder with his right hand. His left arm had just been scratched by a bullet and had been completely broken. Spread out, all at the scattered opening point. He roared, his voice widening. Did they want to disperse, thinking we won't disperse? Officer Ross looked at the dragoons who were starting to disperse in the sky, and he gave the order, get all the cars up. The engines of one or two trucks roared, and they began to disperse, chasing the dragons in the sky on the ground. Boom! A truck slammed its tail and fell from the top of a slope. A raging flame suddenly spewed down from the sky and sprayed onto the ground, illuminating the surrounding sky. The machine gun controlled by the soldier on the truck flicked violently as the truck swayed, and he immediately turned the gun and fired at the sky where the flames had just spewed out. The raging tongue of flame spewed out, and the 14.5 mm large caliber bullet hit the sky instantly, tearing the flesh and blood of the giant dragon. The giant dragon sprinkled a large amount of blood and scales, and Yuan fell from the sky. Yeah! The machine gunner and the deputy shooter on the truck immediately stretched out their hands and clapped in cheers. Chapter 116 Powerful Girls. 2/7. P.S. The second update, there are 5 updates today. A giant dragon soared in the sky, swooped down from the ground suddenly, and a scorching flame shrouded the ground ferociously. Boom! A speeding truck suddenly exploded. Ha 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 ha! You damned lowly mortals! Go to hell with me! The dragon knight on top of the dragon laughed loudly and yelled wildly. But at the next moment, the anti-aircraft machine guns on 2 trucks turned their gun heads and slammed bullets at it. Ferocious firepower poured out, and countless bullets penetrated its flesh and blood. In an instant, the dragon was bruised, and fell from the sky with a howl, spilling a large amount of dragon blood and dragon meat. The body of the dragon knight pierced by the bullet also fell from the dragon and fell heavily to the ground. This side of the town. Nearly 100 mages of the Mage Mobile Unit just took off. They watched the tragedy in the town, the explosions happening everywhere, and the soldiers and knights lying on the ground crying. There were also 500 magicians who could not fly without even seeing the enemy's face, so they were killed in the artillery fire, and they yelled furiously. 297. The leader of the Magician Mobile Unit is a mage of the Sky Mage level. The magic light in his eyes flashed, and he pointed in one direction and shouted, "There are enemies over there." In the direction he pointed, 12 half-orc girls were flying towards them. The magic shield is supported. I want to see what strength the demons among these mortals have. There are only a dozen or so people, let me wipe them all out, and one cannot be left behind. He let out an angry growl. All the mages, who had already suppressed their anger in their hearts, echoed in deep voices, and then their bodies flew in the sky. Pay attention to the enemy. Sniper, kill any target. Machine gunner, suppress them with firepower. The two sides were separated by hundreds of meters in the air. The girl captain held a 2-meter-long L3920M anti-missile 5 rifle and set it up in the air. Clear. Two half-orc girls with a height of about 1.5 meters had an evil smile on their faces. They flew forward, and the machine guns on the magic power supply devices on both sides were fiercely shooting at the scattered magicians, AJCB, from the opposite side. Fire. Chug chug chug. The 4 rows of ammunition chains were spinning rapidly, and the yellow-orange shells were constantly being thrown in the air. Several magicians were shot, and the double shields on their bodies flickered, then shattered, and their bodies were instantly torn apart by the piercing bullets. A large cloud of blood was sprinkled in the air. The body of the unknown wizard fell from the sky. What? Sky Mage's eyes widened in disbelief, and he roared, "Scatter and spread out, those mortals have some kind of powerful weapon. We have an absolute numerical advantage. As long as we get close to them, they can't stop us at all." Immediately, nearly 100 magicians who had been clustered in the sky scattered in the sky like frightened birds. The black robes fluttered in the air, they scattered like ghosts in the night, and began to approach the girl mobile team. Found it. The girl captain's eyes lit up. She had already found a sky mage who gave orders. Quick, there are still 200 meters. Just get close to them, and they are finished. The sky mage galloped through the sky, shouting orders. Boom. 1*GG1 at. The girl captain fired. The huge gunshot instantly spread throughout the surrounding sky, and her body was also moved back half a meter violently. The huge bullet came out of the chamber and instantly hit the sky mage 200 meters away. Boom. There was a loud bang, and the shield on the sky mage who was still giving orders did not play a half-blocking role. The entire upper body burst instantly, leaving only half of the corpse falling from the sky. In the eyes of other magicians, it was the sky mage who died instantly, and then they heard a loud sound from a distance. This attack was transmitted faster than the sound. How could they have such a fast attack? It's just a group of mortals, it's impossible for us to have such an attack. They uttered terrified cries in the sky. Quote exclamation mark quote. Bang bang bang. There were 4 explosions in a row, and the bodies of the other 4 magicians exploded in the air instantly, leaving them dead. The firepower suppression is still going on. Although the distance is too far and the magicians are too scattered, the terrifying firepower of this 14.5mm dual-purpose machine gun still penetrates the shields of several magicians continuously, and even pierces through their shields. The body, like a god of death, took away their lives. In the dark night, the magic power of the mages flickered like signal flares one after another, and the division of fields was obvious. The magic power supply devices on the half-orc girls are specially developed to cover up the magic flashes on their bodies. The mages want to find the enemy in such a dark night, but they all rely on the role of mages with the strength of sky mages. But now, the sky mage was directly sniped, his whole body was smashed to pieces, and the remaining mages were like headless flies. Accompanied by loud bangs, some of them died instantly. The proud shield on his body didn't help at all. In this case, the remaining wizards collapsed. Quick retreat! Quick retreat! We can't beat them, it's too scary. They yelled desperately, and the magic power surged rapidly on their bodies, trying to speed up their escape. But the magician who hastened to escape in everything, the magic power on his body was more intense than other magicians, so it was more obvious. Naturally, it will become the target of the half-orc girl snipers. Boom! Boom! With a sound of gunshots, those wizards who accelerated their escape were hit by bullets one after another. The 20mm large caliber warhead passed through their bodies with powerful kinetic energy, and smashed their bodies. Get ready to clean up the remaining mages. The orc girl gave the order. At this stop, they wiped out most of the enemy mages with 0 casualties. Chapter 117 Hellish Town. 3/7. P.S. The 3rd update, and the 4th update. Hans was wearing armor with magic runes, but the black and gray blood on his body covered up the magic runes. On a face full of smudges, his azure blue eyes looked at the dark sky. Just staring blankly. A flash of blue brilliance flew across the sky and flew into his field of vision. The next moment, the shining blue light spot suddenly disappeared in the air, and then a corpse fell downward in the dark night sky. Then Hans vaguely heard a loud explosion coming from a distance. Hans' eyes quivered. He knew that it was their mage troop. It seems that their magician troops have been completely wiped out. Hans thought to himself. But he didn't move, he was still sitting here, looking at the sky. The sound of gunfire in my ears has never stopped, and I can still hear the screams that continue to come. The miracle is that Hans sat here like this, except for the shells fired at the beginning, not a single shell hurt him again. I don't know how much has passed, 2 hours, or 3, 4, 5 hours, Hans doesn't know. The artillery fire ceased. The enemy is about to attack. Who would send out such a devil-like attack? Hans was very curious. At this moment, he no longer had any fear in his heart. Maybe it was good to be killed by the enemy like this. The artillery attacks that lasted for several hours all hit the small town. The 300,000 troops stationed very densely in this small town have suffered heavy casualties at this moment, and most of them were not killed by artillery fire but were crushed to death by bombed houses. Prepare to attack and wipe them all out in this small town. Rhodes held the binoculars in his hand and looked at the town that was full of flames and had already been ignited. Because of the artillery fire and the many wooden buildings, the whole town started to burn. Thick black smoke rose into the sky, reflecting the half of the sky in the dark night red. The ignited fire undoubtedly caused secondary damage to the troops stationed in the town. Not far from Hans, a knight shrouded in flames staggered out of a burning house, and he let out a miserable scream. The sound was very shrill and painful. After staggering a few steps, he suddenly fell to the ground. Countless soldiers and knights who survived the bombardment died in the sky. The armor on them did not provide any protection, and even the soldiers and knights who were not burned by the flames were heated by the surrounding flames because of the iron armor covering their bodies. The whole person became a large teppanyaki, screaming and being roasted. In order to survive, many knights took off the hot armor that had been baked by the flames. Attack! The attack has stopped. Let's run! A soldier uttered a shrill cry, and they had already been scared out of their wits. Can't see the enemy at all, but suffered such a fierce attack. Countless people were distracted and only wanted to escape from this fiery hell-like town. Run away now! Countless soldiers who discarded their helmets and armor began to flee towards the gate of the town. But as soon as they ran to the gate of the city, they heard a series of loud noises. The sound was so huge that it joined together, once again frightening the hearts of these people. The enemy! The enemy is coming! A large number of soldiers at the front were instantly penetrated by the dense barrage, and fell to the ground struggling to die. So these soldiers began to run back frantically again. The soldiers of the Ross Empire have blocked all the exits of this town long ago. They set up machine guns at the door. Anyone who wants to escape from this town will be mercilessly killed by bullets. The fire is still burning, and such a town has become a cemetery for 300,000 troops. No one can escape, and they can only wait quietly to die inside. At this time, the shelling began again. But instead of a 155mm gun, it was a 120mm mortar. The Liu's army besieging the city began to fire artillery shells into the city from all directions. Torment, pain, hell. This is what all soldiers fear in this town. It's like hell. The 300,000 troops have been full of energy and morale from the beginning, but now they are terrified and defeated. They have long lost the courage to fight, crying in grief one by one. Hiding around like a mouse in the king's city, he looked at the sky in extreme fear, fearing that the next bomb would land on his head again and blow him to pieces just like those comrades who were killed in the bombing. 0, 0. Dead without a whole body. 5 miles outside the town. This is an open and peaceful space. It was supposed to be so. Roar. With a final roar, the last living dragon fell to the ground. Damn, these guys are pretty smart, running around the sky all the way. If we hadn't been driving the car, we wouldn't have been able to catch up with them. A Luosi soldier raised the 98K with a bayonet in his hand, and then stabbed a bayonet into a giant dragon on the ground. In order to chase the last dragon that escaped, they drove in this area for 2 or 3 hours, and only then succeeded in killing it. 0. You lowly, damned mortals. Suddenly there was a shout, and everyone looked around, only to see a dragon knight in armor with one hand missing, being pressed down by the body of the giant dragon, lying on the ground and roaring angrily. Yo, there's still one alive. An officer walked over. A pair of neat black military boots fell in front of the dragon knight. You say we are lowly, and you are lying on the ground covered in blood in such disgrace, how can you be more noble than us? The officer squatted down and slapped the dragon knight on the ground in the face. You be *********D. How dare you insult me? Like this. When the Lord Duke personally leads the army, you will definitely die without a place to bury you. He roared incomparably angrily. Because of his anger, his entire face became ferocious. Unfortunately, you are a great knight. We don't take prisoners of great knights. In our place, dead great knights are more useful than alive ones. Goodbye. The officer took out a pistol from his waist, and pointed the black muzzle at the forehead of the dragon knight who was pressed down by the corpse of the dragon. Dragon Knight's eyes were filled with fear, and he felt endless threats from the little gadget in the officer's hand. Boom. There was a shot. Blood spattered, the skull flew off, and the Dragon Knight on the ground was shot open. The officer wiped the blood off his body in distaste, and said angrily, I would have shot if I knew I would have stayed far away. Chapter 118. Is this really a mortal army? 4/7. P.S. The fourth update, there are 3 more. P.S. Today's update is late, readers, please forgive me. It's daybreak. The fire throughout the night completely destroyed the morale of all the soldiers trapped in the town. Even the proud knights lost the courage to fight together. How this battle was fought, I didn't see the enemy's face at all. They were trapped here like turtles in a cage, and let others kill them. There are basically no intact houses in the town. They are all emitting black smoke, and the streets are full of mutilated and charred corpses. There were even corpses shrouded in armor lying on the ground, exuding the smell of burnt meat. They were not burned to death by the flames, nor were they blown to death, but they were covered in armor, and they were baked into teppanyaki by the surrounding flames. Ross soldiers began to enter the town on 530. They were all in pitch black, their long military boots were on the ground, and the 98K with a bayonet in their hands was tightly followed behind the T-34 tank. Drink. How's it going? Among the ruins, there are several knights who survived by chance to hide, and their spirits are on the verge of collapse at this moment. Ordinary soldiers have already collapsed. They have been trained since they were young, and they are knights who fight, so they can barely support until now. I have lost track of our magician. I don't know where they went, they probably all died. A knight put on his armor again and spoke out of breath. Those mortals will definitely enter the city, we will rely on the ruins to fight them. How many surviving comrades did you find? These fragile mortal soldiers all collapsed. There was resentment in the knight's tone, he said angrily. There are 300,000 troops, of which 20,000 are knight troops, and the other 280,000 are mortal soldiers. After last night, the most casualties were also those mortal soldiers. The casualties reached more than 100,000. As for the knight troops, more than half of them suffered casualties. Although the two troops suffered more than half of the casualties, the night troops were tough and could continue to fight with huge casualties, while those mortal soldiers were completely incapable. Not to mention being caught in the urn and starting a bombing battle around the city, the other mortal soldiers have already collapsed, and it is impossible to continue fighting. It doesn't matter, even if there are only less than 10,000 of us, we will definitely be able to kill all those damned mortals in the Ross Empire in street fighting. Maybe we can turn defeat into victory. Even if they have powerful weapons, they will be killed by us instantly in such a narrow place in the alley. A knight held his long sword and said, "Yes, that's right. We just need to fight them in the streets. As long as our dragon knight troops come over, they must be sure." Another knight drew out his long sword and took off his shield from his back. His tone was very firm. They also have nearly 10,000 knights, so powerful that they can directly defeat a mortal army 10 times their size in a field battle. Impossible that street fighting in a horde of mortal armies can't stall for time. But what they didn't know was that as early as last night, the Dragon Knight troop composed of 500 great knights and 500 giant dragons had been wiped out by what they called a mortal army. On the other hand, Ross's army only suffered more than 20 casualties. This squad of knights ambushed behind the ruins, waiting for the Luo's army entering the city to pass by, and then rushed out to kill them all. Countless grievances and anger have accumulated in their hearts, and they want to vent all of them on those damned, lowly mortals. Boom! Suddenly a strange sound approached, and all the knights were shocked. Coming. Wait, what's that sound? The knight with the missing helmet frowned, and he poked his head out to look outside. Seeing this, he was stunned. The mouth opened wide, and the expression on his face gradually became horrified. Monster. Iron beast. Among the armies of mortals are beasts of steel. Shocked, he roared in fear. The turret of the T-34 85th slowly turned and turned towards him. The deep muzzle aimed at the half-collapsed ruined house where he was. The 85mm main gun fired instantly. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the shell shot out of the chamber in an instant, and then hit the ruins in an instant. Boom! The explosion sounded instantly, and the next moment the half-remained ruined house collapsed instantly, burying all the knights inside. Come on! Kill these damned mortals! In the other direction, the knights in armor didn't care about the shock of the steel monster. They roared, holding shields and long swords in their hands, and rushed directly towards the tank. In a powerful monster, there must be a weakness. Tut chug chug. The soldier controlling the machine gun above the T-34 turned the muzzle of the gun, and the powerful firepower instantly slanted out, knocking those invincible knights to the ground in an instant. Retreat temporarily. Retreat. A knight in the rear uttered a terrified cry, and the group of them immediately fled back in embarrassment. But the speed of the machine gun was not something they could get away with. Ah! The last scream sounded, and the body of the knight at the back was pierced by bullets, a large amount of blood sprayed out, and his armored body fell to the ground. Scenes like this are all over the town. Under the cover of T-34, lost soldiers entered the town. The surviving knights are preparing to attack the Ross army entering the ruins of the town on the eve of the night, but whenever they just appear, what greets them is powerful firepower. Rifles, machine guns, submachine guns, grenades, shells, bazooka. All kinds of powerful 4.1 individual weapons have played a great role in this kind of street fighting. Countless knights who survived the artillery fire were killed by the guns of ordinary Ross soldiers. Hans was dressed in a fairly clean linen and chain mail. He has been taking off his plate armor for a long time. He was walking on the street and bumped into a Luo army head-on. Stop! Hands up! Two lost soldiers with 98K hid behind the T-34 and made noises at him. Such a steel monster. Hans opened his eyes wide, shocked by what he saw. The artillery fire last night, and now the steel beast he saw. Is this really what they said mortals can have? Chapter 119 The Desperate Golden Lion Duke. 5/7. P.S. The 5th update, there are 2 more. Put your hands up and let us see you without a weapon. The Ross soldiers shouted, not only the 98K, but even the 85mm main gun of the T-34 85ths was aimed at Hans. I have no hostility. Hans raised his hands and shouted. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. At this moment, he was covered with a linen inner shirt and chain mail, and nothing else. But Ross soldiers did not dare to take it lightly. The physical fitness of a knight is generally twice that of an ordinary person. Even with bare hands, he can instantly deal with more than 5 mortal soldiers at close range. Hans walked over slowly, he was afraid of the huge steel monster. But as he got closer and closer, he discovered that this steel-covered thing was not alive. I didn't feel any breath of life, and there were soldiers of the Ross Empire inside. Hans saw the soldiers inside from the observation port of T-34. This surprised Hans even more. Oh 9. Such a creation, without any magical breath, how did it make him move? Hans became more and more curious about the army of the Ross Empire. With your back to us, behind your hands, be good, don't let the bullets in our guns go through your head. 2 Ross soldiers stepped forward and took out a pair of special steel handcuffs, then handcuffed Hans behind his hands, and let him walk towards the group of prisoners behind. When Hans got here, he realized that he was not the first person to surrender. Here is a group of ordinary mortal soldiers, and a few knights. At this moment, they are all squatting here, their hands are handcuffed, their faces are ashamed, and their faces are full of despair. For them, being defeated by the Ross Empire so easily is unacceptable in their hearts. And their consistent understanding of mortals has been completely broken here in the Ross Empire. The battle ended quickly, and in front of the Ross army with a series of powerful weapons, even the Knight army could not stop it. The Ross soldiers were good at cleaning, holding 98K and searching among the corpses in the town. If there is an enemy who is seriously injured and not dead, the Ross soldier will raise his 98K with a bayonet to the ground to make up for it. In this battle, the Tus Empire army captured 2,000 knights and more than 50,000 mortal soldiers. When the Loth army captured those mortal soldiers, they even had ecstatic expressions on their faces, because they would not have to die if they were captured. The 300,000-strong Golden Lion Duke's troops killed more than 230,000 people in this battle, or disappeared. Attacking them was a division with less than 20,000 Ross troops. The Ross Empire army with less than 20,000 people completely wiped out an army of the Duke of Golden Lion. At the same time, the raids on Duke King's troops by Loth's troops in other places have also ended. In just 2 days, the Ross Empire army with a total of 100,000 people wiped out the Golden Lion Duke's troops, which numbered as high as 1.5 million. The combined casualties of all the Ross Empire troops were no more than 1,000, and the number of Ross soldiers who were actually killed in battle was no more than 300. Most of them were killed by the long-range attacks of dragon knights and magicians. And this victory, in addition to being passed back to the country to be known by Gu Yuan, is also madly passed on to hundreds of human countries around. With 100,000 troops and fewer than 1,000 casualties, the Ross Empire wiped out a total of 1.5 million troops of the Duke of Golden Lion. After handing over the captured enemy troops to the follow-up troops, the 100,000-strong Los Angeles army began to form divisions, riding trucks, bringing tanks, artillery, etc. to advance crazily. Wherever the troops of the Ross Empire went, they were warmly welcomed by mortal countries. Even when a regiment arrived in a mortal country, the head of the regiment was personally received by the king. The Ross Empire has truly gained a reputation in the war of the past few days. The Ross Empire has also truly become famous throughout the continent. However, the army did not stop, and the army of the Ross Empire began to rush madly within the sphere of influence of the Duke of Golden Lion. In just 3 days, 2/3 of the Duke of Golden Lion's territory was directly pierced. Wherever it passed, no Golden Lion Duke's troops could resist it. Anyone who tried to stand in the footsteps of the Empire alone was crushed by the tanks. How did you fight this battle? The Duke of Golden Lion roared in his castle. Below are 5 great knights, who command 5 legions. This is also the last elite of the Golden Lion Duke. Each legion has 50,000 people, all of whom are knights, making a total of 250,000 knights. However, in the past few days, they have been beaten back and forth by the crazily advancing Ross Empire army. Almost as much as the Ross Empire army advances, they are defeated. There are a total of 31 cities to which the Duke of Golden Lion belongs. However, under the fierce attack of the Ross Empire, more than 2/3 of them have fallen into the hands of the Ross Empire. And with the last lost city as the border, the road to the border doctor of the Luz Empire. Among them, more than 30 countries have all surrendered to the Ross Empire. It even includes several countries controlled by the Duke of Golden Lion. Regarding this situation, the Duke of Golden Lion was naturally extremely angry. They are mortals. Mortals. In the face of mortals with weak bodies, you actually retreated steadily. You didn't even dare to fight the enemy. You retreated all the way. You have lost 20 of my cities to me. A total of 20 cities, and those countries, with more than 50 million people, all took refuge in those damned, lowly mortals of the Ross Empire. The Duke of the Golden Lion was furious. He roared crazily, and with a violent wave of his hand, he swept everything on the table in front of him to the ground. Among them was his favorite, which he bought back with hundreds of thousands of gold coins, antique vase. At this moment, it suddenly shattered and became fragments scattered on the ground. The 5 legion commanders shrank their bodies and trembled, and the fragments of the vase also splashed on them, and the armor on their bodies was jingled. You bloody bastards! The Golden Lion Duke's golden beard and hair seemed to stand up, but in the end he could only sigh. The tall body trembled a little at this moment. Go down! The Duke of Golden Lion sat on the chair in silence for a long time, finally sighed and said. Only then did the 5 legion commanders heave a sigh of relief. They bowed violently to the Duke of Golden Lion, and finally filed out. Could it be that I really want to lose to a mortal country? After everyone went out, only the Duke of Golden Lion was left, with a hint of despair on his slightly aged face. Chapter 120 Hardworking Hans. 6/7. P.S. The 6th update, and the last update. Hans had been captive for a whole week. During this week, he heard the terrifying attack speed of the Ross Empire army from the soldiers' chats. Like a sharp sword constantly advancing, from the border area of the Gutongxi Empire, it directly penetrated into the heart of the Golden Lion Duke. You must know that the Duke of the Golden Lion is one of the several great dukes of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire, and he controls almost 1/3 of the Gutongxi Empire's army. He was directly driven into the hinterland by the terrifying attack of the Ross Empire army, which shows that the Gutongxi Empire has been attacked to the hinterland by the Ross Empire army. This result shocked all the surrounding countries. Countless countries wavered from the beginning, and completely invested in the Ross Empire. If there is a map representing the sphere of influence, it can be clearly seen that the huge area of the ancient Tongxi Empire, and all countries close to the Ross Empire have all been dyed the colors of the Ross Empire. The Gutongxi Alliance Empire has lost almost half of its territory. This result completely shocked the royal family of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire. Although up to now, the royal family of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire has not had much control. Almost all the troops are under the control of the 3 dukes of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire. And once the Duke of Golden Lion is defeated, it means that the other 2 dukes will also be defeated. Hans was shocked by the strength displayed by the Ross Empire. This is countless times stronger than he expected. Just as everyone thought, this is the strength of the Ross Empire, but Yuan will tell them later that this is not the full strength of the Ross Empire. And along the way, Hans also saw that the army of the Ross Empire did not disturb the people, did not plunder, only attacked the Duke of Golden Lion and the troops that were enemies with them, and cared for the civilians even more. This moved Hans very much. Because the army of the Ross Empire is the army of his dreams. They will not bully civilians, plunder, or kill them, but be polite to civilians, and even protect civilians from the suffering of war. This is the team he should join. It's just that he is currently a prisoner of war. This identity made Hans extremely distressed. How should he join the army of his dreams? But Hans has nothing to do at the moment. On this day, they were transported to a place. Here is the mining area. This group of damned mortals actually treat us as coolies. Let the noble knights dig mines. After seeing what this place was, most of the knight prisoners of war started to make a fuss. What's the noise? Be quiet. A loath soldier came over with a 98K in hand, screams angrily. After the Duke's counterattack, you wait for death. You can't fight against the mighty Gutongxi Empire. A knight prisoner shouted. Although they were easily defeated by the Ross Empire army, they have been deeply rooted in the strength of the Gutongxi Empire for decades, and each of them believes that they are only a temporary failure. When the Empire counterattacks in full force, these damned lowly mortals will fail. Don't wait, it's impossible, the Gutongxi Alliance Empire has already been defeated. Hans spoke coldly to the knight from the side. What he despises the most is this kind of idiot who can't recognize his identity at any time. He is obviously nothing, but he still thinks highly of himself, as if he looks down on anyone. There are not many such people in the army of the Gutongxi Alliance Empire. The closer it is to the central domain, the more people there are in such a foolish room. Hans had really met a great magician from Central Region. That great magician was humble and polite, and treated everyone equally. Hans believed that the real magician class should be like that, not the stupid people in front of them. A fool who doesn't know his own identity, thinks highly of himself, and sees people with colored glasses no matter what the situation is. Compared with these people, the army of the Ross Empire is much better. When can I really join the Loss Empire? Hans had also heard of the name of the Ross Empire before, but at that time he was also very surprised, and even once thought it was fake news. Decades of life made him think that the gap between the Mortal Kingdom and the Gutongxi Empire was too arrogant. Hans didn't look down on others, but this situation has long been a common knowledge. Hans even thought in his heart that it was impossible for a mortal country like the Ross Empire to exist. But after seeing the Ross Empire for real, Hans realized that he was wrong. The Ross Empire is an empire against common sense, and their army is also an army against common sense. Anyone who is in front of them will probably suffer a crushing defeat. Hans felt a little annoyed. If he had known earlier, he would have gone directly to join the Ross Empire, instead of joining the army of the Duke of Golden Lion, which was very close to his hometown. UB ******************* D, what are you talking about? The knight glared at Hans with a very bad tone. I said that the Gutongxi Alliance Empire will fail. Even if they are undefeated now, they will not be able to win in the future. They will not be able to defeat the Ross Empire. Hans looked at the knight squarely and said word by word. "You traitor. B ************ D. The knight roared, and the whole person pushed towards Hans. There was no way, he was tied up, and he wanted to teach Hans a lesson, so he could only push him with his body. Hans deftly dodged to the side, and the knight fell directly to the ground. Hans looked at him with disdain in his eyes, and said, "The Gutongxi Empire has no future." Possessing such powerful weapons, disciplined, and qualified troops, what about the idiot army of the Gutongxi Empire, which claims to be aristocrats and a class of powerful magicians, but in fact acts no differently from robbers or demons? Maybe beat the Ross Empire. Hans yelled at the knight lying on the ground. UB ********** D. The knight fell to the ground and let out an extremely suppressed growl from his throat. "Whatever you are doing, please be quiet." 2 Ross soldiers came over and reprimanded them. "He's been arguing all the time, I just teach him a lesson." Hans stood up straight, and said without squinting, "For money." Crack clap clap. At this time, there was a burst of applause, and an officer wearing a dark military uniform, a large brimmed military cap, and a medal on his chest came over. This military uniform looked so energetic and handsome, which made Hans' eyes shine. "You are very good. I heard what you said just now. The Gutongxi Alliance Empire understands the truth like you, and there are not many people who know current affairs." The officer praised, with comfort in his eyes. He is an extremely proud soldier of the Ross Empire, so he is naturally proud of the Ross Empire. "When it's time to mine, I can let you be the head of these prisoners of war, so you don't have to work hard," the officer said to Hans. In a word, Hans's fate here has been straightened out. "Thank you, my lord." Hans was overjoyed and thanked him immediately. Although he is only the head of the management of the prisoners of war, this is the first position he has obtained here in the Ross Empire, and he must perform well. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audio Wave to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.